Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if Deku became a scientist on Island? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Quirks, mutations that humans as well as some animals have been developing for the last 2 centuries, have puzzled scientists around the planet who have been attempting to figure out how humans suddenly obtained superpowers that seem to come straight out of comic books, with little success. Countries were in total disarray. They didn't know how to handle events that didn't match the ordinary, so new societies had to be thought out and built to match this reality. Heroes appeared, people who were trained and licensed to use their powers, and the world had forgotten about the old normality. They were everywhere, on radio shows, on television, on the internet. You could walk down the street and meet a superhero as if he were a police officer patrolling. At the time of this story, it is assumed 20% of the global population is quirkless, meaning they haven't developed or shown a quirk by the time they are around 4 years old. Izuku Midoriya is one of these quirkless people. He lives in Japan with his mother, as for his father. At least he left him a passion for technology and a life lesson about what being quirkless means. Izuku's father worked abroad, in America or perhaps Europe. Izuku didn't want to know more. He was lucky that he had one parent who cared about him. Izuku was 4 years old when he figured out he was quirkless and would remain that way until the universe collapsed and perhaps a new reality popped into existence like the first one. Izuku was 6 years old when his childhood friend became quirkist and actively turned into a bully. It was also at that time his middle school taught the other children how different quirkless people were from normal humans. Izuku was 12 when he joined Aldera Junior High. He learned hell existed, and being quirkless and treated as such had become natural over the years, but it had never been that bad. It had taken one Katsuki Bakugo straight up telling him to commit suicide in front of the other students and the teacher to realize that something was wrong. The worst part is that at that moment he could only agree with his classmates so that the teacher wouldn't put a mark on his file for disrupting class. Izuku had 3 passions in his life: heroes, becoming one, and quirks. Liking heroes was an obligation, really. Humans tend to become very aggressive when they disagree on something. Again, Izuku was quirkless and would always be in the wrong if he attempted to defend himself. That was how the system worked, and he wouldn't try his luck with finding heroes or police officers who wouldn't be quirkist too. He had never given up on becoming a hero. Did he wish to prove them wrong? To be selfish? No, Izuku just wanted to save people like All Might, the top hero of Japan, the people's champion, the symbol of peace. He had seen a video of his debut once. And since that moment the image of civilians smiling as they were surrounded by pain and death was stuck inside his brain. He wanted to make people smile, to tell them everything would be fine because someone was there for them. Fame? Money? Izuku never needed that, especially not fame. Though he wouldn't be against having a fair amount of money to secure his quiet little life. But still, people weren't satisfied. He liked heroes, and it was a problem because Izuku wanted to become one. The poor, quirkless, defenseless Izuku, the one who hadn't been lucky enough to follow the natural march of progress that was evolution. He is weak. He is stupid. He will die before he reaches his 20th birthday, the internet said so. My parents said quirkless people are more exposed to sickness than we are. Right? The teachers said his grades were terrible during the last council. I think being quirkless also means he is a RETD. And so on. All Izuku had were quirks. Well, not his, other people's quirks, to be precise. He was curious by nature. Quirks were an endless stream of possibilities. He liked to study them, to crack them open like a vault. He analyzed any detail he came upon. Inko Midoriya, his mother, praised him more than once when she happened to look at his work. She would say that perhaps not even the hero who possessed the quirk knew about what Izuku would find out. One day Izuku brought one of his notebooks to class, hoping that he could show that he wasn't an idiot, that he was normal, that he could still fit among his classmates. What a fool he was. His notebook was destroyed. Katsuki was the one who found it. He passed it around the room saying, "Look at what our quirkless freak resident has done." They didn't bother reading it. They said it was creepy, that Izuku was probably a pervert too and should be reported to a teacher. When the book returned to Katsuki's hands, the blonde promptly reduced it to ashes. He never brought a notebook to class again. And then came that day. It had been 2 months since Izuku had been attending classes at Aldera. It was Friday. He had just left school and was expecting to finally be able to relax for the weekend. It would have been the case if a villain with some kind of slime or sludge quirk hadn't been passing by and thought to himself, "Oh, what a nice temporary body." Izuku thought he would die here, full of regrets and dreams he could never achieve. Perhaps in the afterlife, he might find some peace? But fate had decided to keep him on Earth for a while longer. All Might dropped out of nowhere and smashed the villain to God's only know where. When Izuku woke up from near asphyxiation, the symbol of peace was still here, handing him back his notebook. All Might left in a hurry, and Izuku grabbed onto his leg. He found out about his true form, the injury. And then he asked if someone without a quirk could become a hero. After a never-ending painful monologue, All Might left after concluding with, "You have to be realistic." Izuku had been left alone on a roof by All Might, the greatest hero of Japan, a symbol of peace, his idol. Never meet your idol, they say. Izuku figured it wasn't about meeting the complete opposite of how they envisioned someone. The saying meant that your idols might be perfect, but if you are unlucky enough, they will show you their worst side. All Might lies, lesson learned, Izuku thought to himself as he picked up his belongings. He had to head home now. He should have been desperate, sad. He had to feel something, and yet there was nothing. I have to be realistic, Izuku repeated to himself. His head hurt a bit just then. It's good to dream, but it hurt even more, like each word that came out from All Might's mouth was being hammered down like nails inside Izuku's brain. What's wrong with me? The pain stopped. A soothing shiver ran across his skin, an uncanny jolt of energy. It didn't come from him. I must be going mad. Izuku was at least lucky enough to find the roof access door open and was able to make his way back to the streets of Mizudafu. On his way back home, Izuku came upon a blockade that would force him to make a detour. He overheard a couple of heroes speaking together. Good thing All Might joined in to end the fight. I didn't know he was around. It was Death Arms and Kamui Woods. You are aiming for Yue, my boy? With that display of skill, I'm sure you can make it to your hero academia. It stung not his head but his heart. It did feel right, like something was misplaced. Izuku should have been standing where Katsuki was. He should have been the one to receive. Never mind that. He took a deep breath and walked away from the scene. I'm home, he called out after closing the door of their small apartment. Apparently his mother hadn't returned home yet. Izuku figured she was out shopping or went to speak with her good friend Mitsuki Bakugo. Yes, Katsuki's mother, another reason why Izuku has to endure. Who else would like to be friends with the one who conceived a quirkless reject like him? No homework, just a weekend full of nothingness. And perhaps some quirk analysis? He had seen Mount Lady's debut. Surely people would be active on a lot of forums. Izuku knew where to look for information. The internet is the land of truth. Sarcasm aside, there weren't a lot of forums Izuku actually spent time writing on, either because there were just people repeatedly spamming how cool some hero is, or others spreading hate about mutants and, more rarely, quirkless people. After a couple of hours making a resume on his observations of Mount Lady's quirk, Izuku made his post. It was around 2,000 words long. And then my teachers say I never put enough dedication into my homework, he thought to himself. Plus, everyone wrote in English on these kinds of forums. With how much time he spent gathering information or writing entire resumes about his theories, Izuku was fluent, which was not the case with any of his classmates. Not that anyone cared about his skills in foreign languages. Somehow his thread trended quickly. One user, simply named Mel, posted back a rather long reply regarding the new hero's costume. Izuku wondered if her username was a reference to the old scripting language called L. He didn't have a specific username himself. Eventually, people would get friendly, then ask about his quirk, and it would all go wrong. Right now, his username was Nemo, a reference to a nameless captain in some fantasy book from the pre-quirk era. Before that, it had been Wildbush. He found the name when looking into a mirror. He didn't like it. Mel wrote the following: "Your observations are very complete. You gathered so much just from watching her stomp on someone rampaging with their quirk? Personally, I'm more curious about what happens to her body while she is transformed. What about her organs? You said her weight increased. From a physical point of view, this means it's not her body that stretches out. I believe it compacts when she is under her normal form. But in that case, it means she weighs the same at all times. Is she actually very strong then? She could operate indoors as well. Could she shrink down with enough training?" Mel was raising a lot of good points. Izuku was already preparing another wall of text to reply to each subject with as many details as he could. Izuku had been so focused that he didn't hear his mother saying she was back home. He only paid attention when she peeked into his room to tell him dinner was ready. At the time she pointed it out. "You look really joyous tonight. I shouldn't say it's unusual, though. Is everything all right?" Oh, I just met someone while writing on a forum. They enjoy quirks as much as I do." Inko was as worried as her son. What if they aren't a nice person? What if they are just using Izuku? Her son wasn't an idiot, far from that. But he had always been too optimistic. "I have to send a reply and I'm very distracted, sorry. We are eating together, I shouldn't." "You can leave the table if you are done eating. Go on, I would never dare take off this smile from your face. Do not keep them waiting." With his mother's permission, Izuku dashed back to his room after helping to clean up the dishes, of course. He was about to type another 100 words when he noticed that he had a notification on the top of his screen. Mel had sent him a private message. "Hey, I was thinking we should take this conversation elsewhere. I'm worried that the mods will flag us as spammers." Their conversation went on for hours, and they weren't talking about quirks only. They talked about her costume, the support company that produced it, and the science behind it. The fabric stretches to over 400%. It must be so thin that any cut would tear it apart, and yet it just holds. I wish I could get a sample of it for my own studies. Izuku was intrigued. He wondered how old Mel was. He typed the following: "This does come out of nowhere, but I have had bad experiences with people online. Just so we don't end up in some vicious cycle of hate, I would like to establish a few rules. No information related to our quirks, no talk about politics, and we won't share any personal information, though I guess names are alright." Mel typed back, then she didn't for a few minutes. Izuku feared he had been too direct. However, she did send back a message. "I understand. In fact, I was about to ask you the same thing, though I would like to have the bare minimum. I am Melissa, studying to become an engineer in the hero industry." Now the origin of her username was obvious. "I should return the favor. I am Izuku." He froze. The words didn't flow this time. He didn't know. All Might's words held back his fingers away from the keys. "I'm not sure anymore about what I want to do, but I like heroes and quirks. With your skills, you should have no problems finding a job. Say, the fight happened near Mizudafu, right? Were you just passing by, or do you live in the district? If the latter, could you perhaps check the area where she intervened and look out for a piece of her costume? It might not have received any damage, but who knows, perhaps it will be our lucky day." He had to read the message a few times. Yes, it was their lucky day. The next day, while Izuku was having breakfast, Inko suched on the television. He wished she hadn't. Katsuki ended up being mentioned in the local news. He hadn't been interviewed, and even if he was, Izuku could guess why he had been cut. "I'm heading out, I need to check out something for a friend." He stood up and grabbed his backpack. "A friend? Oh, you mean that person online?" There was clear disappointment in her voice, but Izuku had a friend, right? Online or not, it was always better than nothing. Stay safe while you are out. Though with All Might in town, no one would dare attempt anything, right? Izuku forced himself to smile. If people knew. He stopped the thought before it allowed fear to take root. "I won't be out for long. I will just be buying some books." Inko waved him goodbye, and Izuku went out. The street had been closed, no one was there to watch or secure the perimeter. What would be the point? Izuku noted that most of the destruction was Katsuki's doing. However, there was one building that had been damaged from the top. It was hard to see, but it seemed Mount Lady had gripped the building. The street was too thin for her to fit. There might just be a chance. Izuku looked around. He saw a very small piece of cloth, white and purple. He grabbed it and quickly placed it inside his backpack. He would have a look at it later. Izuku had gotten curious about a few of the terms used by Melissa. She was smart, if not a genius. He felt it. Exchanging with her was different. He had met a few nice people on forums online, but he always felt disconnected. He had so much to say, but he lacked the ability to transcribe it from his own gibberish into a common vision. A week passed. Melissa and Izuku kept exchanging messages. They had cracked the mystery of Mount Lady's costume together. It was just a question of heat. Whoever thought about this was very clever. When transforming Mount Lady's body emits heat, the fabric dilates but doesn't become thin. Instead, it becomes squishy, like jelly. Izuku theorized it could mend itself. Weird request, but do you think you could mail me the sample? I have a personal lab at my school. I might be able to get more information out of it. It's not illegal. We didn't steal anything. You picked it up from the ground. Ignoring the fact that Melissa mentioned they might be engaging in criminal activities, Izuku asked for her address. I live on Island with my father. I will copy the address for you. It will take a week for the sample to reach me. Island. Izuku had heard about it. The greatest engineers all studied there. It was like an eternal universal exposition. The place itself might be a century into the future in terms of technology and medicine. Wow, it must be wonderful to be surrounded by so many inventors. You live there? Have you met David Shield? Melissa typed, then deleted her message, then typed again, and so on. Well, I do not want to brag, but we are related, so I do meet him on a very regular basis. He is very busy most of the time. I just want to follow in his footsteps, really. Melissa? Related to David Shield? Izuku was shocked. He never hoped he would meet. Well, no, he shouldn't get too excited about it. Melissa knew David Shield, sure, but she could be lying, she could be exaggerating. Who knows? Oh, also, I will buy myself a camera so I can show you my lab. Do you have one? It would be great if we could see each other or talk directly. Not that I do not feel comfortable with text, I'm not pressuring you, I promise. I do have one in my room. Sure, that would be great to talk for real. I'm excited about seeing your lab too, though I guess my expectations are probably higher than reality is. I will be depositing the sample at the nearest post office this afternoon. He typed back. He was about to log out, but Izuku still had a few questions for Melissa. She had been very open with him, and he wished he could trust her. This is going to be a weird question, but the concept crossed my mind recently. Do you think someone without a quirk can be a hero? Melissa didn't reply. In fact, Izuku couldn't see any message indicating she was typing back. Then, out of nowhere, a single sentence popped up, a question. Are you quirkless? Izuku slammed his portable computer shut and jumped into his bed. He had made a mistake. A month had passed since Izuku met Melissa on an internet forum. He had stopped checking their private messages weeks ago. He didn't want to be disappointed anymore. He managed to stay calm and distract himself with the new books he bought, following Melissa's advice. It worked for a while. Why did he have to ask? He wanted to be certain he wasn't being tricked only to be humiliated later. He regretted it anyway. Stupid deck dash. Stupid Izuku. Katsuki had been the hero of the school since the Sludge villain incident, as the media called it. It was a PRD of peace for Izuku, no teasing, no insults, no whispers behind his back. As long as people were busy praising Katsuki, everything was fine. Until someone noticed Izuku had been reading new books. He shouldn't have dropped his guard. Some girl he didn't care about snatched his manual on thermodynamics and showed it to the whole class. Look at what Deku is reading. Izuku remained calm. His book would get destroyed again. What would be the point if he indulged them? Everyone kept making comments until one sentence caught Katsuki's attention. Thermodyn what? Deku trying to look smart now? What a show-off. Katsuki kicked his desk away and walked to Izuku, snatching the book from the girl's hands and smashing it in front of him. Explain this, you freak. What was he supposed to say? Any word would only fuel Katsuki's anger. It had always worked that way. Answer me. Now, what is going on here? The teacher arrived, not bothered by one student threatening another. They would have been if it wasn't Izuku. Bakugo, we have a long day ahead of us. Could you go back and sit at your desk? No, stupid Deku hasn't answered why he reads a book. Katsuki sounded like a caveman. The teacher rolled his eyes and checked the manual. He raised an eyebrow and brought it back to his desk. Midoriya, detention for disrupting the class. Of course, Izuku would be punished anyway. Now, about yesterday's study. When the day finally ended, the teacher asked Izuku to remain after all the other students had left. Definitely not a good sign. Now, can you explain why you brought this to class? How does one simply answer, I brought a book to class to read it, when the interlocutor doesn't expect any answer and is just trying to punish him? Izuku did something he never thought he would. He lied. I have been offered to join Island Academy. I'm studying for their entrance exam. Izuku played a dangerous game, but he caught the teacher's attention. But you keep saying you want to become a hero. He had to keep them confused. It was his best shot at leaving with only detention. I gave up. It was foolish. I'm moving on. He didn't want to elaborate further, not when All Might had been the one to convince him. In this case. Do not bring it back to class. You aren't here to become an engineer. Then what is he here for? And I'm still expecting you to join detention in 15 minutes. So much for having the last word. Izuku's head buzzed. The teacher went on to lecture him about being more attentive and not disrupting people with an actual future, but he wasn't listening. When Izuku was finally allowed to leave the classroom, he made his way out of Aldera. He wouldn't go to detention this time. He lied to a teacher. He ran away from school to avoid detention. If he had been labeled a nuisance before, now he might be identified as a delinquent. The teacher called his mother, of course, and Inko asked for an explanation, of course. Izuku approached the situation carefully. You know I'm quirkless. You can guess how everyone interacts with me at Aldera. I was reading a book that Melissa suggested, and the other students noticed. The teacher made an example of me and sent me to detention for reading a book. It was the first time he reported this kind of incident to his mother. Inko knew, she always knew, but since Izuku never told her or mentioned anything, she thought it wasn't that bad, right? Today was different. The school never called directly, and the first time they did, they employed the kind of tone they would have used if Izuku had murdered someone. I stepped out of line. I'm sorry. Is it bad? Am I getting expelled? Her son was wrong. How could he worry about getting expelled? She hugged him. Izuku, they are not expelling you. I am pulling you out. We will find a solution together, I promise. Her baby boy. For how long had he suffered like this? She knew Japan was definitely not the best country in terms of quirk equality. How much bulldash nonsense did he go through? I will try to find online schooling. It might even be cheaper than going to Dash. I'm sorry, Izuku admitted. I thought I wouldn't be able to trust you, that I might be a dead weight. It's fine. I know I'm quirkless. I was just unlucky enough to be born at the worst time for our kind. Inko briefly considered slapping her son, not because she was shocked by his words, but because she wished to annihilate any ideas those monsters at Aldera and other schools had put into his head. Izuku, you are perfect as you are. You have a big heart, bigger than All Might's. I want you to always fight for what you believe to be right, to run away when you do not feel like fighting, to always follow your instincts. You are my treasure, my miracle. It's mostly my fault. I always knew something was wrong, and even then, you held on for me? I'm pathetic. I will fix everything, I promise. Aldera's staff can go to hell for all I care. We have more than enough money to search elsewhere. They ate katsudon that night, and it tasted better than it ever had. Izuku wouldn't go to school the next day, and probably for a while. They stayed together in the living room for a couple of hours after dinner. Izuku had a lot to talk about, and eventually, he spoke about Katsuki's behavior. Inko had to admit it was also in her bag of suspicions. Mitsuki often asked if Izuku was feeling good at school. She never elaborated. She was a mother too. How could she ever think her son was such a little demon? When Inko asked if she should tell Mitsuki, Izuku didn't answer. Ever so kind, he told his mother she should judge for herself if Katsuki's parents deserved to know. She listened to her wrath and made sure to call Mitsuki. Their phone call went on and on. Inko remained as calm as she could. She didn't blame her friend. Mitsuki was blunt. It was part of her personality, but she would never have raised her son to become a quirkist, egocentric trash. Aldera had corrupted him. If anything, Inko prayed that Katsuki's parents would be able to save what remained of the son they knew. Izuku was about to go to sleep when curiosity got the better of him. Since they had to search for online schooling, he thought he should put in some effort himself. To his surprise, his computer was still on the same session, with his private chat with Melissa open. She had sent many messages after he ran away. Are you still here? I shouldn't have asked about your quirk status. I'm sorry. It was one of your rules and I broke it. I have nothing against quirkless people or any type of quirk. I swear on my life that I am not and will never be this kind of person. The next day, I assume you got scared. Please reply. I'm going to feel guilty for days at this point. A week later, I'm reaching out again. Please accept my apologies. Whoever you are, no matter how hard it is for you, I want to know you are not alone. I believe you are a kind and smart person. I'm sure you can do great things with that mind of yours. As for your question, I believe anyone can become a hero if they work hard enough. Well, now he was the one who messed up. Melissa was an angel. Izuku found the courage to type back. Now he was the one who needed to apologize. He started typing when suddenly his computer buzzed. Melissa was calling him. She must have seen the notification of him typing on his computer. Izuku plugged in his headset and clicked in panic to answer the call. Izuku? Is that you? I'm so sorry. Please accept my apologies. She didn't even give him time to speak, greet her, or reply. She was genuinely concerned about how their last discussion ended, even after he had ghosted her for weeks. She even bothered to speak in Japanese, a very clean Japanese, though Izuku detected some glimmers of an American accent. Hey Melissa, he greeted in English. It's fine. I got scared, you were right. I am indeed quirkless. In Japan, it's not a good thing. I was worried you might hold the same beliefs. I guess I also forgot to send the sample of Mount Lady's costume dash. Who cares about the costume? I'm worried about you. Are you alright? You didn't answer. I was so scared. I told my dad that you lived in Japan and that you were quirkless. He told me things that Melissa collected herself for a few seconds. I shouldn't have read all these articles about quirkless people suiciding or meeting horrible fates. Day after day I was more and more convinced that it could be your turn. She kept using Japanese out of respect. Izuku was used to reading these kinds of articles, but Melissa didn't live in Japan. Island was closer to America. On the other side of the ocean, quirkless people probably had to deal with way less nonsense, as Inko defined it. I am fine physically, mentally not so much. It has been a very long day. And well, I have been concerned about our conversation for the last few weeks too. I'm really exhausted, to be honest, and I also need to find a new school too, preferably online, he explained without going into the details. What happened? Did you get expelled? You could always try to fight your school if they dash. No, it was my choice, really. I brought that book you suggested to me about thermodynamics to school, and it didn't go well. They do not have the same level of expectation between quirked and quirkless people. I didn't know it was possible to have a negative level of expectation until today. Melissa chuckled. You sound like you are taking it well. I am free from hell, not that I do not like school, but they sure did everything they could to not make it appealing. Neither of them spoke for about a minute, then an idea struck Melissa. How about you come study at Island? Izuku's mind didn't trigger immediately after he heard Melissa's offer. When his body reacted, and he found himself sitting straight in his chair, he gasped for air. He had been left brain-dead for too long. Izuku? Please tell me I didn't say something wrong again. And no, of course not. He tapped the fingers of his right hand rapidly on his desk. Melissa was making him an offer, a big offer. That would be great, but I do not have the money to study at Island. My family isn't that rich. I can get you a study fund. I told you I was related to David Shield. He is my father. She announced it with such pride that Izuku had to hold his jaw shut to silence his excitement, though Melissa Shield, that was going to be awkward from now on, probably heard everything. I showed him your thesis on Mount Lady's quirk and her costume. He was really excited when I told him you found a piece of her costume. He is just as curious as you are about quirks, though he prefers the practical approach. If I tell him you are currently schoolless and looking for a place to study, he will harass me to convince you, so I might as well try now. It's not that easy. I need to speak with my mother. Wow, that's a lot, Melissa. How can I ever repay you? Do not. That's what quirkless people do to support each other. But you are quirkless too? Extra toe joint buddies? Izuku slammed his head against his desk, hard enough to regret punishing himself that way. I'm an idiot. I am a clueless idiot with a bush of hair and a quirk addiction. Melissa reassured him. No, you are not. You couldn't know. Wait, bush for hair? You said you were quirkless. That would be genetics. I have forest green hair from my mother, and my father probably gave me the DNA to make it go wild for no specific reason. Can we talk about something else, please? I need a bottle of water. I'll be right back. Melissa spent the rest of the night convincing Izuku about the merits of moving to Island. As much as he wanted to say he was on board and ready to move there immediately, he knew he had to explain to his mother first how he ended up with a plan to leave Japan. The next day, Inko and Izuku sat on the living room couch, going over their only current option. So, let me get this straight. You've met the daughter of one of the greatest minds of the century, and she believes her. Father will be welcoming you to Island's Academy for free. Inko's skepticism was clear. She didn't trust the internet, but she trusted Izuku's judgment. Still, caution was warranted. Actually, he's also offering us the chance to move there too. Izuku opened his computer and showed his mother the email he had received. It looked very official, to say the least. David Shield had written it himself, applying an array of seals and formatting that made it seem anything but a scam. But despite its almost too perfect appearance, Inko was willing to read it, and if possible, meet Melissa's father. Dear Izuku Midoriya, while we haven't met in person yet, my daughter has painted a very optimistic picture of you. She showed me some of your posts about heroes and quirks, documents of the sort usually found only in government records or sold by experts. I also reviewed her notes on her latest project, which you contributed to significantly. I'm intrigued by the sample of the costume you collected. The industries in Japan often keep their findings from us, both for commercial reasons and because they have different policies. Putting that aside, my daughter provided a thorough explanation of your search for a new school. I sympathize with your situation. My own quirk is often undervalued, and it pains me to think of my daughter facing similar treatment. I believe you have a bright future ahead, and I wish to support it. I'm offering you and your family the opportunity to move to Island. However, I would like to have a discussion with you and your parents first. Please inform Melissa of your availability so we can arrange a video call. I am eager to meet my daughter's friend. Yours truly, David Shield, Director of Island. After reading the email a few times, Inko was convinced. Well, he certainly seems determined to have you study at his facility. What do you think? What do I think? It's David Shield. He's a legend. Of course, I want to study at Island. It's close to America, and from what Melissa has told me, people there are much more accepting than they are here in Japan. The level of education is incredible, almost like a miniature university, but with the potential to create the next great minds of the world. I could do anything if I graduated from their academy. Izuku's excitement was palpable. This opportunity felt like a miracle he needed to seize. But Inko's next question made him pause. What about your other dream? Do you still want to become a hero? I haven't been very supportive all these years. You've always looked up to All Might and you aiming for the top is fine, but I worry about you pushing yourself too hard. You can be a hero, Izuku, but reaching their level might be out of your grasp. It pains me to say it, but... Izuku smiled reassuringly. No, you're right. I never aimed to be the next All Might. I don't like being in the spotlight as much as he is. Being popular is just a bonus. I just want to help people. If Japan doesn't want my help, then that's their loss. David Shield believes I could be useful, and if I don't become a hero, I could always become a scientist. It's not as glamorous, but I could work with heroes or quirks. I don't want to hurt myself anymore. I've been treading water when I should be looking for solid ground. Metaphorically speaking. Then message your friend. Inko said with determination. I'll handle things with her father. Now, you need to focus on impressing him. You'll need more than just a few quirk analyses. Don't you have books to read? His mother was right. It was time to show his potential. They settled on a voice call by the end of the week to accommodate David Shield's schedule. This gave Izuku ample time to dive into the books and documents Melissa would send him, while they immersed themselves in discussions about various topics. Melissa repeatedly reassured him that her father was a kind and understanding person, urging him not to worry about first impressions. Ironically, her reassurances only heightened Izuku's anxiety. He had never met anyone's expectations, and the thought of impressing David Shield, someone he considered a genius, was daunting. He wasn't exactly a genius himself, at least not according to his grades, and he might even have a mild attention disorder. If you're so worried, how about a surprise quiz? Melissa suggested. You've got those prepared? Izuku asked, intrigued. Just like athletes, I need to stay sharp. I have a couple hundred of these quizzes, and I randomly pick 5 each day to review every few hours. First question. Wait. First question. Melissa's tone was cheerful yet firm. Explain the principle of superconductivity. Izuku took a deep breath. Superconductivity is a phenomenon where a material can conduct electricity without resistance when cooled below a certain critical temperature. This means that electrical current can flow indefinitely without losing any energy. Superconductors are used in technologies like MRI machines and maglev trains because they generate strong magnetic fields and minimize energy loss. Excellent. Next question, what is Moore's law, and how has it impacted the development of technology? Moore's law, Izuku began, is the observation made by Gordon Moore in 1965 that the number of transistors on a microchip doubles approximately every 2 years, while the cost of computers is halved. This law has driven the exponential growth of computing power, making devices smaller, faster, and more affordable over time. It's a key factor behind the rapid advancements in technology. Melissa's approval was evident. Great answer, Izuku. Third question. Can you describe the process of DNA replication? Sure. Izuku's confidence grew with each question. DNA replication is the process by which a double-stranded DNA molecule is copied to produce 2 identical DNA molecules. It starts at specific locations called origins of replication. Enzymes like helicase unwind the DNA, creating a replication fork. DNA polymerase then adds nucleotides to the existing strands following base pairing rules, and ligase seals the fragments, resulting in 2 identical DNA molecules. You're doing amazing, Izuku. Melissa encouraged. Next question. What is the significance of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle in quantum mechanics? The Heisenberg uncertainty principle states that it's impossible to simultaneously know both the exact position and the exact momentum of a particle. This principle introduces fundamental limits to what can be known about quantum particles and implies that at a microscopic level, the universe is inherently probabilistic rather than deterministic. Last question, Melissa announced. Describe the function and importance of the Large Hadron Collider. The Large Hadron Collider, or LHC, is the world's largest and most powerful particle accelerator. It accelerates protons and heavy ions to near the speed of light and then collides them. These high-energy collisions allow scientists to study fundamental particles and the forces governing their interactions. The LHC was crucial in discovering the Higgs boson, which helps explain how particles gain mass. You nailed it, Izuku. Melissa cheered. See? You've got this. Just be yourself during the call with my dad, and you'll do great. Izuku smiled, feeling more confident. Thanks, Melissa. That was really helpful. I'll keep studying, but I feel better about this now. I didn't think I could do it. Did I get anything wrong? You recited everything straight from the... I trust you enough to say you weren't cheating, Melissa confirmed. Though, since we haven't met face to face yet, would you like to use cameras? We'll be seeing each other when you meet my father anyway. It might help you feel more comfortable. Izuku realized he had been talking to Melissa online for weeks, but he had never imagined meeting someone who saw him as a decent human being, especially after his quirk notebook incident had labeled him as a pervert. Sure, though I should warn you I haven't had a haircut in a while and my freckles. Melissa's camera activated. She looked stunning with her long, curly blonde hair, round glasses, and fair skin. She had a more Caucasian appearance but still resembled her mother. So, how do I look? Izuku was momentarily speechless, his eyes wide with surprise. You look great, Melissa. Really great. I wasn't expecting this. Melissa laughed, a light, friendly sound. Thanks, Izuku. Now your turn. With a deep breath, Izuku turned on his camera. He fidgeted nervously, his unruly green hair falling into his eyes, and his freckles standing out on his cheeks. Here I am, he said awkwardly. Melissa smiled warmly. You look fine, Izuku. Actually, you look just like I imagined, minus the bush on your head. Don't be so hard on yourself. Izuku felt a wave of relief wash over him. Thank you, Melissa. That means a lot. They continued talking, discussing their favorite scientific concepts and theories, sharing laughs and stories. Melissa's easygoing nature helped Izuku relax, and he enjoyed the conversation more than he had expected. All right, Izuku, Melissa said after a while, we should probably get some rest. Tomorrow's a big day. Yeah, you're right, Izuku agreed. Thanks again, Melissa. For everything. Anytime, Izuku. Sleep well and remember, you've got this. Izuku nodded, feeling more confident than he had in a long time. Good night, Melissa. Good night, Izuku. Izuku careful dressed in what he thought was the perfect balance between casual and studious, choosing his favorite t-shirt. He wanted to appear as a relaxed, average Japanese student, not too formal, not too sloppy. His nerves were on edge, though. Melissa would be there too, hopefully to support him, since she was quirkless as well, right? Still, a small part of him feared betrayal. What if she turned on him just as he was close to achieving his goal? The thought gnawed at him, but he knew deep down that Melissa wasn't the type to deceive. No one could pretend for that long with such attention to detail, right? Unless it's All Might, he thought with a grimace, remembering his former idol. Even then, resenting the symbol of peace didn't really help ease his anxiety. As the time approached, his mother's voice interrupted his spiraling thoughts. It's almost time to call them, Izuku. Don't worry too much. I assume David will handle most of the questions. Just keep your head up and be yourself. A stuttering mess? Izuku asked, his tone devoid of sarcasm, just plain worry. Izuku, Inko said gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. You really need to work on your self-esteem. You are certainly not a stuttering mess. Just try not to get too in-depth if he asks about quirks. She was wearing a green jacket that gave her an air of authority, like a seasoned financial counselor or attorney. It contrasted sharply with Izuku's more casual look, and he couldn't help but wonder if he seemed out of place next to her. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves, and dialed Melissa's number as planned. She must have been eagerly waiting because she answered almost instantly, her bright voice coming through even before the video fully loaded. There you are. I almost thought you wouldn't join. Just kidding. You're about 5 minutes early. Hello, Izuku. Hi, Miss Midoriya. Already on a first-name basis? You work quickly, Inko teased her son with a smile. Hello, Shield-chan, and thank you for being so kind to my son. Please, just call me Melissa, she replied with a shy smile. I'm not too comfortable with honorifics. I guess they don't really fit with American names. Izuku is a great friend, and we started off with some ground rules about not judging each other by our origins, so there's no reason to change that now. My father isn't done with his meeting yet. American companies are all about money. He's probably thinking about how to implant micro-firework mines into their heads just to be free from this hell. He really doesn't like handling all the legal work, but he can't trust anyone else with it either. He sounds like a really genuine person. Izuku joked, though a part of him was now worried about boring one of the greatest scientific minds in the world. Or worse, having his head blown up in a puff of colorful smoke. How are you today? Did your exam go well? Oh, wonderful actually. I may have used some of your work on mutant quirks. What you've written is an endless gold mine, and I'd rather put it to good use than let it get lost or stolen on some shady internet forum. Melissa sent Izuku a copy of her work for the month's exam at Island Academy. He marveled at how alike they were in their tendency to cram as much information as possible into a single document, though Melissa's was far more organized. And no, it's great really. I feel honored you used it. You contributed too. Oh, the sample. I'm so sorry, I forgot again. Since he wasn't going to Aldera anymore, Izuku could have sent it at any time, but his custom science study schedule was very distracting, to say the least. You'll just have to bring it with you when you move to Island, Melissa teased. Assuming I impress your father enough to earn that chance, Izuku countered, though he couldn't help but feel the odds were against him. I guess most of the students at your academy are actual geniuses, probably younger than me. Way younger than me. You might be surprised, Melissa said, her tone holding a hint of cunning. Izuku replayed their conversations from the past few weeks in his head. Something felt off. All these tests. You haven't been helping me, right? They were for real. Melissa's wicked smile and nod confirmed his suspicions. You didn't actually write any of those yourself either, did you? That's partially true, Melissa admitted. I added some of my own, but most of the quizzes were created by my father as I grew up. He made some specifically for you, though. He just asked if I could subtly try them on you. These were advanced, sure, but you need practice. Still, you absorb knowledge like a sponge. Consider yourself having passed the entry exam of the academy. So now I just need to show your dad I'm a decent human being? Izuku asked, hopeful. About that, came a deep voice from off-screen. Melissa moved aside to reveal David Shield himself. Melissa told me you wouldn't be yourself once I was on camera, so I'm glad she distracted you long enough for me to get a true impression of you. As they say at you, I'd rate it a good plus ultra. I'm a me, Mr. Shield. Izuku stuttered, his anxiety kicking in full force as Inko ruffled his hair, trying to calm him down. Mr. Shield, it's a pleasure to meet you. Your daughter is a real angel, Inko greeted, her confidence shining through despite the emotional moment. Thank you for finding time in your busy schedule to meet my son. You must be Inko, David replied, his tone warm. Melissa didn't tell me much about you, so I did a little research. Had quite a wonderful start as a legal counselor, though I didn't pry too much into your private life. I was just curious to see where Izuku might have inherited his sharp mind. You flatter me, Inko said modestly. Izuku developed those on his own. I should let my son speak now, he just needed a few seconds to collect himself. Her insight into Izuku's insecurities was spot on as always. Why, sir, I apologize, Izuku said, his voice trembling slightly. It always gets me this way when I meet someone I respect. Haha, as popular as I am, I've been gifted with enough anonymity to walk down the street without being swarmed by civilians or rare fans. Only heroes can handle that kind of attention. As engineers and scientists, our role is often overlooked, but without us, most heroes wouldn't even be able to use their quirks. Izuku nodded eagerly. You personally worked on the concepts and designs for 13th spacesuit, right? I also believe it was a company from Island that developed Eraserhead's capture scarf. These are specific tools, but the research behind them always contributes to a bigger project. He was grateful for the years he'd spent stubbornly analyzing heroes and quirks. David raised an eyebrow, impressed. You did your research about 13, clearly, but how did you know about Eraserhead? He's very careful about covering his tracks. Oh, that's easy to guess, Izuku said, his nerves momentarily forgotten. The capture bands used by Island's security system work almost the same way as Eraserhead's capture weapon. The main difference is that they aren't energy-based. The fabric is different, probably has to do with memory form. Izuku had scoured the limited information available about Island's security system, which was often praised for being as effective as those in high-security prisons. David sighed, then chuckled. So much for keeping our secrets safe when all you need is internet access. He clapped his hands together, his expression shifting to something more serious. There's really only one thing I wish to know about you, Izuku. My daughter mentioned a question you asked her. Do you, or did you, want to become a hero? Izuku felt a wave of nostalgia crash over him, pulling him back to that rooftop where All Might had shattered his dreams. David's shield kept talking, but Izuku's mind was elsewhere, reliving the moment when his world had crumbled. Izuku? If you aren't comfortable, you can always. Yes, I wish to become a hero, Izuku admitted, his voice steady but filled with emotion. But recently I met someone who showed me how flawed the profession is. They didn't believe in their own words, and they were someone I looked up to for a long time. After talking with them, I didn't feel like fighting anymore. Then I met Melissa, and I found new motivation. The only thing I've ever been good at is analyzing quirks and heroes, discovering everything I could about them, their strengths, weaknesses, and potential. I cannot become a hero in Japan. This country is hell for my kind, for quirkless people. You don't have to decide your future now, David said, his tone gentle. You have years to grow and figure it out. Island's Academy is advanced, yes, but it doesn't only produce scientists. Anyone can graduate, cooks, lawyers, dentists. You could always go to Europe when you graduate, or perhaps even Canada? The United States are better than Japan in terms of quirk equality, but there are still a lot of radical cells active. In the past, Americans used to protest for their right to carry firearms at all times without restrictions, resulting in thousands of deaths each year. Nowadays, it's free quirk usage, but their police and heroes can hardly keep up. But Island allows free quirk usage, doesn't it? Izuku asked, confused about where David was going with this. We do, in our facilities, but not in the middle of the streets. Japan doesn't allow any quirk usage without a license, and there are no facilities where people can train their quirks like a gym. As for all these young people who apply to hero schools with prior experience using their quirks, you can guess how many times they've broken the law. David had a point, one that Izuku could personally attest to. His back still bore the marks of Katsuki's explosive quirk. You're right, Izuku agreed, his voice tinged with bitterness. The law doesn't work, or most people openly ignore it. It's become so common that nobody feels like it's wrong. I'm willing to go anywhere else, really. It can only be better than Japan as far as I know. Izuku. David's voice was soft, almost fatherly. I left the United States specifically because I couldn't let Melissa grow up in that kind of environment. But you grew up in Japan. I'm not blind. How bad was it? Melissa glanced at her father, worried that he was pushing Izuku too far, especially after she had barely scratched the surface of his experiences. Izuku felt the familiar burn on his back as memories resurfaced. He reached for the sleeves of his shirt, pulling it off despite his mother's protests. David's shield asked, so he needed to show him proof. It's not all from the same person. Inko tried to stop him, shaking her head in dismay. Izuku, stop. They should know. David and Melissa's eyes widened in shock as they saw the first and second-degree burns that marred his arms and shoulders. One even looked like it had reached the third degree. It was recent. And may I put my shirt back on? Izuku asked, his voice trembling with a mix of shame and relief. Weiss, you should, David replied, his voice shaking slightly. And Miss Midoriya? Inko, she corrected gently. Inko, we should finish this conversation in private. Melissa, could you step outside for a while? His daughter gave Izuku a sympathetic look before leaving the room. Inko kissed her son on the forehead before he retreated to his bedroom, where he sat with his phone, texting Melissa. She tactfully avoided mentioning the burns or anything related to his treatment as a quirkless person. He appreciated that. He didn't want pity right now. I acted without thinking. I shouldn't have shown you my scars, he typed, feeling a bit embarrassed. You've probably seen your fair share of horrible things on the internet alone. It was your choice, Melissa replied almost immediately. I think you were very courageous. I admit, I was curious too, and now I feel guilty. I wanted to ask, but I assumed you'd been through this. My father ended up crossing that line. Actually, I'm glad he asked, Izuku responded, feeling a surprising sense of relief. It feels like a weight has been lifted. He knows where I'm coming from now. I'm always cautious with people I meet. 99% of the relationships I've had with people have been bad. You're the first real exception. He hesitated, then deleted the next part of his message before sending it. No offense, but I wish I could have been friends with someone who doesn't immediately relate to me. Inko eventually called Izuku back, and David invited Melissa to return. Well, everything is settled, David said, his tone now businesslike but warm. I'll have everything ready for you once you arrive on Island. I'll be counting on Melissa to give you a tour of the island. Right now, I'm working on a very large project for a government that shall not be disclosed, and I really need to focus with my lab partner. Of course, Inko responded, a determined glint in her eye. We'll start packing as soon as possible. We'll be there by the end of next week. Izuku was surprised by how quickly his mother had settled everything, but then again, it must be a Midoriya thing. A week went by and nothing out of the ordinary impacted the Midoriya's life, if not the phone call of one Mitsuki Bakugo who did her best to apologize for her son's behavior after investigating herself into Aldera's pedagogical customs. Inko thanked her for trying to catch up with her mistakes, but she warned her friend that it was too late to fix anything, that from now on they should remain as far away as possible from each other's, which was exactly what the mother and son were preparing themselves to do. My first time on a plane. Did you ever use one, Mom? Once, I went to Europe with Mitsuki. I had saved a small amount of money and we had a decent level with English. We had a wonderful week together. It's not as scary as you think. Just imagine we are taking a train ride. A train ride in a private expensive jet. Courtesy of David Shield, giving them the red carpet when they might be the worst investment of his life. Are you sure he planned it that way? Shouldn't we be taking a regular plane? One with normal people in it. Less complaining, Izuku. David would be so disappointed if he learned that you felt uncomfortable for the whole trip. Izuku was starting to think his mother had gotten accustomed to being on first-name basis with his maybe future employer way too quickly. Island was one of the marvels of the modern world, though it was difficult to say which rank it would hold. Humanity had a tendency to build new monuments only for time to eventually claim them, leading to a never-ending cycle of creation and decay. But in Izuku's era, this artificial island was more than just a marvel. It was the cradle of humanity's future, at least from a scientific perspective. The plane that brought them to the island performed a vertical landing, a feat that seemed almost magical to Izuku. He didn't question why David had sent them a plane that could transform into a jet midair. The airport was clearly equipped for conventional landings. Perhaps it was just a little showmanship? Upon arrival, the staff at the airport efficiently took charge of their belongings, freeing the Midoriyas to make their way to the entrance plaza, where they were to meet with Melissa. The vast, gleaming space felt oddly calm, with fewer tourists than Inko had expected. There aren't as many tourists as I expected. At least we won't get lost in a big crowd, she noted, her voice laced with relief. Izuku nodded absent-mindedly, his eyes darting around, trying to absorb every detail. The island was a far cry from the bustling, hero-filled streets of Mizudafu. Here, everything seemed vibrant, yet peaceful, and the absence of heroes patrolling every corner made the city feel more genuine, more human. It was a living, breathing city where people worked, studied, and lived their lives, unlike the amusement park-like atmosphere he had imagined. The old Izuku would have spent hours gawking at the pro-heroes, but now he had bigger dreams to chase, or at least he hoped he did. A sudden sound interrupted his thoughts, a springy, rhythmic noise growing louder as it approached. Izuku! Before he could react, Izuku was nearly knocked off his feet as Melissa launched herself at him, her arms wrapping around his shoulders in a tight embrace. Melissa, he stammered, struggling to keep his balance as she clung to him. Ichai. Tigusil close. Melissa finally released him, her face beaming with excitement. Oh, I've been waiting all day for your arrival, she exclaimed before turning to Inko with a warm smile. Hello, Miss Midoriya. Please, call me Inko, she replied, her eyes drifting to the unusual contraption Melissa had used to reach them. That's an interesting means of transportation. Oh, this. Melissa glanced at the pogo stick she had ridden in on. It's just a side project I'm working on. The theme for our practical exam over the next 2 weeks is terrestrial means of displacement. I'm trying to improve the efficiency of how people walk and run. Have you ever seen prosthetic legs? I think I can make a more ergonomic design, but, I'm starting to ramble. We have so much to see and so little time. Let me show you your apartment first. Izuku's mind was still reeling from the fact that he had just been hugged by a girl. Another miracle in his already strange and quirkless life. Thank you, he managed to say, still dazed. You can thank me properly after you've had some rest and a healthy lunch, Melissa said, leading them inside. When they reached their apartment, Melissa introduced them to what she called a healthy lunch, which turned out to be synthesized powder mixed with water, a meal Izuku had only ever associated with astronauts. Hesitant, he didn't dare ask if they had katsudan flavor, but Melissa, in her ever-efficient way, showed him how to create different flavors by adjusting the composition. In a matter of minutes, he had accidentally created something that tasted like beef bourguignon, a dish his mother explained was a French specialty she had once tasted during her travels in France. Not bad, Melissa remarked, saving the new flavor profile to their database. Your first chemical experiment here is a success. Well, a tasty success anyway. Izuku couldn't help but wonder aloud, isn't there any actual food on the island? Like, normal food. Melissa shook her head, smiling. Nope. All the ingredients are synthesized here and harvested directly from the sea. It's incredible how much the ocean provides. Since the island is constantly moving, we're always gathering nutrients from different areas. Robots handle everything. They've got basic AI models to manage the processes. Izuku's eyes widened in disbelief. So, did I just eat seaweed? Yes. Melissa confirmed, her eyes twinkling with amusement. Izuku stared at the empty bowl in his hands, struggling to comprehend. How can seaweed taste like carrots? You aren't doing actual alchemy here, right? Melissa chuckled, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Maybe my father is. Maybe not. Could be part of some top-secret classified project. As Melissa led them up the path, both Midoriyas were in awe, their eyes widening as they took in the sight before them. The house was more than just a home. It was a sprawling estate, surrounded by manicured gardens and dotted with trees that offered a sense of privacy and tranquility. The architecture was sleek and modern, with large glass windows that allowed sunlight to flood the spacious interior. Izuku couldn't help but marvel at the sheer size of the place, certainly not something they could have ever dreamed of back in Japan. And this is your new residence, Melissa announced with a broad smile, her voice full of excitement. Izuku and Inko exchanged bewildered glances. They had thought Melissa was showing them some important landmark or maybe the residence of a high-ranking scientist on the island, not their own home. The house was enormous, far beyond anything they could have imagined for themselves. Izuku could see his mother's hand trembling slightly as she clutched her purse, a telltale sign of her nervousness. No, Izuku said, his voice barely above a whisper. He turned to Melissa, shaking his head in disbelief. Thank you so much, but I feel insecure about everything you're doing for us. He gestured to the house, his hand shaking slightly as he did. This is too much. Mean we appreciate it, really, but we can't? Melissa waved off his concerns with a smile. You haven't even seen the best part yet. Come on, there's one last surprise specifically for you, Izuku. Follow me. With hesitation, Izuku and his mother followed Melissa through the house, which was as stunning on the inside as it was on the outside. The polished floors gleamed under the soft lighting, and the furnishings were modern yet comfortable. Every corner of the house exuded luxury, something they were entirely unaccustomed to. Melissa led them to a door that opened onto a staircase descending into what seemed like a basement, but as they reached the bottom, Izuku realized it was far from any ordinary basement. The space was enormous, stretching out into what seemed like a hangar-sized room. The walls were lined with shelves and workbenches, all stocked with various tools, equipment, and raw materials. Industrial-grade 3D printers hummed quietly in the corner, and a state-of-the-art computer system was set up on a desk, surrounded by monitors displaying complex schematics. The air smelled faintly of metal and machine oil, the scent of endless possibilities. "This," Melissa said, with a hint of envy in her voice, "is your personal workshop, Izuku. I'm jealous, my workshop back home is a mess. I wish I could just move here and start over." Izuku's mouth hung open as he slowly turned in place, taking in the vast expanse of the workshop. "Why is everything oversized here?" he exclaimed, his voice tinged with panic. Melissa laughed. "Why do you keep thinking so small? This is your house now. Do you feel like it's too much?" "Oh, of course it is," Izuku stammered, running a hand through his unruly hair in frustration. "Sorry, but switching from a four-room apartment to the closest equivalent of a villa is very disturbing. What am I supposed to do when you and your father realize I'm just a normal human with nothing special about me?" Melissa's expression softened as she stepped closer to him. "I'm also a normal person with nothing special about me," she said quietly. Izuku shook his head, his eyes downcast. "Your father is a genius, and you're basically walking in his footsteps. Meanwhile, I'm just an average Japanese quirkless student with average grades who nerds out too much over quirks. Can you both please take it slow before treating me like I'm a VIP?" Melissa's eyes narrowed in determination. "But you are a VIP." Izuku frowned, confused. "Based on what?" "You're so dense," Melissa said, crossing her arms. "You're my friend. You are smart, whether you like it or believe it or not, and you do deserve compensation for everything you've been through." Izuku looked away, his expression pained. "You shouldn't be the ones to compensate for though," he murmured, the weight of his past struggles pressing down on him as he stared at the floor. Melissa sighed. "Look up. I hate it when someone looks down on anything. You are really annoying when you look down at yourself. My first project since you arrived will be restore that self-confidence. Assuming he ever had one in the first place. Oh, one more thing before we continue. Me and my father just happen to be your next-door neighbors." Izuku blushed. He clearly caught Melissa's hidden intention. "Let's get to my lab now, and bring along the piece of fabric. I have been waiting to have a look at it for too long." The Shield residence bore a striking resemblance to the one assigned to the Midoriyas, though it was far more vibrant and filled with memories and happiness. The warmth and life that permeated the home reflected the close bond between father and daughter. Upon their arrival, Melissa wasted no time, taking Izuku directly to her personal lab. She also had a workspace at the academy, but that was reserved for school projects. This lab, however, was a testament to her lifelong passion and creativity. The lab was filled with incredible inventions: a deep-sea diving suit designed for extended exploration, a multidirectional headset equipped with cameras and a hacking system, and a motorcycle that could transform into a lightweight aircraft capable of soaring through the sky. These were just a few of her most recent achievements. "I assume you've tested these yourself?" Izuku asked, marveling at her creations. "Of course." Melissa grinned. "I love diving when the island is stationary. The drones keep sharks and other predators at bay, so it's safe. My dad and I go whenever he has time, which isn't often, but we try to make it a monthly thing. Would you like to join me sometime?" "Sure. I've never been diving before, but I'd love to try. I'm actually a pretty good swimmer." "No way." Melissa laughed, teasing him. Did I just hear Izuku Midoriya compliment himself? Have I finally uncovered that hidden ego? Izuku rolled his eyes playfully and handed her a piece of Mount Lady's costume fabric. "Here, it's heavier than I expected, partially metallic, but not enough to be manipulated by a quirk or affected by external forces. I thought about cleaning it since it's pretty dirty, but I was worried I might damage it," Izuku added. "You did the right thing. No worries, though it would be pretty ironic if the company that made this couldn't handle an everyday washing machine," Melissa joked as she rolled over to a sophisticated scanner, gesturing for Izuku to join her. "Let's see what this fabric is really made of." The scanner hummed to life, and beams of light swept over the fabric, analyzing its composition. Izuku watched in awe, feeling like he'd stepped into the future. Looks like a derivative of Kevlar at first glance, Melissa said, studying the data. But the structure is quite different. It's highly resistant to slashing but less so to piercing damage. What's impressive is how much it stretches. It can absorb impacts by dispersing the force. I tested its heat resistance with our stove and boiling water, Izuku chimed in. Under constant heat, it stretches and inflates, but the density remains unchanged. When an external force tries to push in, it hardens like metal. This fabric is tailored for someone like Mount Lady, Melissa noted. Unless someone can raise their body temperature to extreme levels without dying, it's not practical for the average person. But if we could replicate this process for a smaller form factor, it could be as strong as titanium while still being light and flexible. What if we added an exoskeleton between two layers of fabric? Izuku suggested, his mind racing with possibilities. It could enhance movement, sure, Melissa agreed. But unless someone invents a portable energy source as powerful as a nuclear reactor that can fit in the palm of your hand, it's not feasible. Although, she turned to a drawer and pulled out a small wristband. Here, try this. Izuku examined the device, curious. It's so compact. How does it? He pressed the obvious button, and in seconds, thick bands of fabric wrapped around his arms, fitting perfectly. Wow. This is incredible. It fits like a glove. How did it mold to my forearms so precisely? Your skin acts like a network, Melissa explained, her eyes sparkling with excitement. It uses sound waves to scan the shape of your body. Think of it like a sonar. Like an Aldera SND? Izuku asked, catching on. Exactly. My goal is to create a full-body version, and if I can replicate the synthesis process for Mount Lady's costume, we'll have the perfect fabric for this device. A universal emergency safety suit. That sounds like an amazing project, Izuku said, clearly impressed. I'll make sure you get credit. Unless you'd like to keep working with me? Melissa asked, her tone hopeful. You'd really let me? Izuku glanced around the lab, his eyes wide with wonder. You'd let me help with your work? If you can handle me talking to myself and redoing things 70 times in a row, then sure, Melissa teased. But we can talk more about it tomorrow. It's your first day at the academy, you should get some rest. Izuku nodded, still a bit overwhelmed by everything. See you tomorrow, Melissa. Don't oversleep, she called after him with a smile. Jet lag, he should have anticipated it. Well, he did. But Izuku hadn't considered he might get lost on his way to his class. When he did find the room, he had no other option than to get in and hope the teacher would be kind. It could take a full week to solve this, and I expect all of you to dash. The teacher had a slight German accent and glared at the intruder at the door. Izuku Midoriya, I presume? Causing trouble on your first day? So be it, let's see if you can catch up. What are we solving for? The professor gestured at the board, which displayed an intricate set of differential equations related to the Schrödinger equation in quantum mechanics. The problem was to determine the probability density function of an electron in a potential well with time-dependent perturbations. It was a complex problem that required not only a solid grasp of advanced quantum mechanics, but also the ability to handle time-dependent variables and partial differential equations. Izuku took a deep breath and approached the interactive board. The room's silence was almost palpable as he scanned the equations, quickly identifying the patterns and relationships between the variables. His mind raced, piecing together the solution. With a surge of confidence, he began to write, his hand moving swiftly across the board as he filled in the missing steps and completed the equation. He stepped back, praying he hadn't missed something crucial. I apologize for being late, sir. I lost my way to class. He had failed, hadn't he? He could feel the other students' gazes on him, his heart sinking as he braced for the teacher's response. That would be correct, the teacher said, completely dumbfounded. How did you figure this out? Izuku shifted uncomfortably, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on him. I just, recognized the type of potential well and applied the time-dependent perturbation theory. Then, I used the method of separation of variables to solve the differential equations. He paused, hoping his explanation made sense. The teacher's expression softened slightly, though he still looked surprised. Impressive, Mr. Midoriya. That was not an easy problem, and you solved it in mere seconds. It seems you have a strong grasp of quantum mechanics. Let's hope this is a sign of your potential and not a one-time fluke. Izuku nodded, relief flooding through him. Thank you, sir. I'll make sure to be on time from now on. The teacher gave a curt nod before addressing the class. All right, everyone, take note of Mr. Midoriya's solution. We'll be discussing it in detail during the next session. Now, let's move on to today's lecture. Izuku quickly found an empty seat thankfully next to Melissa and slipped into it, trying to ignore the curious glances from his new classmates. As the lecture continued, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride mixed with a healthy dose of nervousness. He had managed to impress his teacher and peers on the first day, but he knew he had to maintain this level of performance. Average Japanese student, Melissa whispered to him as she reproduced the anxious tone Izuku had employed the previous day. Could still be a fluke. Izuku countered while he did his best to catch up with the rest of the class. And would recommend playing Iron Man OSC Trinkets to Kill a Prince for the next part. The day unfolded without much events, a series of quiet observations and introspective moments for Izuku. He remained on the periphery, watching as the other students navigated the large university-level classes with ease. The sheer number of students, nearly 100 per course, emphasized the scale of this new environment. Thankfully, he found himself grouped with Melissa for the day's schedule, a small comfort in this overwhelming sea of unfamiliar faces. He suspected David Shield's influence had something to do with it, but he was grateful nonetheless. The final class of the day was led by someone named Samuel Abraham. The name resonated with Izuku, sparking a memory from his countless hours of research. If he remembered correctly, Abraham was a renowned quirk specialist with an impressive background, an MIT graduate with expertise in thermodynamics. Izuku had read about his work before, making this class one he had been particularly eager to attend. I apologize, but today's class will be shortened, Professor Abraham announced as he entered, his tone brisk and authoritative. Duty calls at the most inconvenient times. I'll be handing out the assignment for the end of the next trimester. You may work in groups if needed, but be aware that I will closely monitor the contribution of each member. No one will be allowed to ride on the coattails of others. Additionally, every project must be submitted to me for approval before I allocate any budget, no exceptions. Is that clear? The room remained silent, the students seasoned enough to know when not to challenge a professor's directives. Excellent, Abraham continued. I'll provide you with the details now. You can pick up the printed documents from my desk before you leave. Izuku was surprised by how early classes ended here, but it became clear that the workload was intense, with a strong emphasis on self-directed learning. The assignment itself seemed straightforward, energy sources of the future. As he read through the prompt, Izuku couldn't help but feel a strange sense of serendipity. Melissa needed a power source for her latest project. Perhaps this assignment could kill two birds with one stone. The idea of merging his academic work with practical application sent a thrill through him, and he was eager to discuss it with Melissa. As they collected their notes and prepared to leave, Melissa offered him a knowing look. You should get used to Professor Abraham either not showing up to class or leaving us to our own devices. He works with my father's team, so you can imagine how busy he is, she explained as they walked. How was your first day? Izuku seemed distracted, lost in his thoughts. It was wonderful, he finally responded, though his tone suggested his mind was elsewhere. Melissa noticed his demeanor. You don't have to be on guard here, Izuku. You kept your head down all day, but I saw you glancing around every few minutes. She paused, trying to bring him back to the present. Are you already working on the assignment? Oh yes, he replied, snapping back to reality. I think I might be able to work on it and help you with your power source problem at the same time. Melissa laughed, a light, teasing sound. I believe Professor Abraham meant environmentally friendly energy. You can't just WHP up a fusion reactor that fits in your hand. Izuku's eyes sparked with determination. How do you know if no one's tried yet? Melissa looked at him with a mix of admiration and amusement. You're serious? Ha, you're something else, Izuku. You're reaching for the stars before you've even shred the basics. I have to catch up to you somehow, Izuku said with a smile. I probably won't be able to make a hand-sized fusion reactor right away, but I'll start slow, I promise. Melissa nodded, her expression softening. Students have a monthly budget for their projects. You should have more than enough to get started on something within Professor Abraham's criteria. You can build on it from there. They had been walking for a while, and Melissa suddenly stopped, realizing they were now standing between their respective homes. I'll get started on my end too. Good luck, Izuku. See you tomorrow. She waved before heading inside. Izuku waved back, feeling a warmth in his chest. He entered his own home to find his mother, Inko, surrounded by stacks of papers and documents in the living room. Hi. What's all this? Inko looked up, smiling. Izuku. How was school? Fine, he replied, glancing at the papers. The teachers are nice, I guess. He noticed that the documents looked complicated, filled with legal jargon. David offered me a position in their legal department. It's a bit of a mess, but I'm trying to get everything sorted. Dinner is ready, by the way. I tried something Italian tonight. It's quite easy once you get the hang of these powdered ingredients. Thanks, Mom, Izuku said, nodding. I have to go work downstairs first. I'll come back when I'm done. Once in his makeshift workshop, Izuku pulled out a new notebook, ready to start fresh. He sketched out a title page, doodling a small alien at the top, though he wasn't sure why. He hadn't decided on a name for his hopefully first invention yet. While renewable energy sources seemed like a logical path, he knew they wouldn't be enough to power Melissa's equipment reliably. He needed something more sustainable, perhaps something with the power of a car battery to start. Hey Izuku, think. How does a fusion reactor work in the first place, and how can I make it compact? He stared down at the blank page in his notebook. His mind raced with possibilities, ideas flitting in and out as he tried to envision the design. A compact fusion reactor. Something that could produce immense energy in a small, contained form. The thought seemed impossible, but then again, so did so many of the things he'd already witnessed in his life. He picked up a pen and began to sketch, his movements quick and fluid as he let his mind wander over the concepts he'd learned in school, combined with the advanced theories he'd only read about in passing. Fusion reactors typically required enormous pressure and temperature to force atomic nuclei together, releasing energy in the process. The challenge was containing that reaction in something small enough to fit in his hand, or at least something portable. Think, Izuku. What could contain that kind of energy? How can I stabilize it? He muttered to himself, his pen scratching rapidly across the paper. He considered various containment methods, from magnetic fields to advanced materials that could withstand extreme conditions. But everything seemed too large, too unwieldy for what he wanted to achieve. Then an idea struck him. It wasn't just about containing the reaction, it was about harnessing it efficiently, using the energy it produced without letting it become unstable. He recalled something he'd read in one of the research papers David Shield had made public from I-Island's archives. A theoretical material that could absorb and redirect energy, something that had never been fully realized in practice, inspired by All Might's quirk. What if I could create a reactor that doesn't just contain the energy, but channels it directly into a usable form? He thought out loud. He sketched out a basic design. A core where the fusion reaction would take place, surrounded by layers of this theoretical material, which would absorb the energy and convert it into electricity. From there, the electricity could be stored in high-density batteries or used directly to power devices. But how do I trigger the reaction without needing a massive amount of initial energy? Izuku frowned, tapping his pen against the desk. He needed a catalyst, something that could start the reaction at a much lower energy threshold. His mind drifted to plasma, a state of matter that could be generated with relative ease, given the right equipment. Plasma induction. He murmured, scribbling down the idea. If I can create a controlled plasma field within the reactor, I could use it to jumpstart the fusion process. The plasma could be maintained with a small, stable current, enough to keep the reaction going without spiraling out of control. As he refined the design, he started thinking about the shape of the reactor. It needed to be compact but also modular, something that could be integrated into various systems depending on the need. He doodled a circular design, with the core in the center and the energy-absorbing layers radiating outward like petals on a flower. "This could work," he whispered to himself, his excitement growing. "If I can build a prototype and test the containment field. If it works, it could power anything from Melissa's equipment to an entire facility." He leaned back in his chair, looking at the rough design he'd sketched out. It was ambitious, maybe even crazy, but the more he thought about it, the more he believed it could be done. He would need to source the materials, build a containment chamber, and find a way to generate the plasma field, but those were just steps along the path. The idea was solid, and that was the hardest part. He grabbed his phone, scrolling through his contacts until he found Melissa's number. He needed to talk to her, to share the idea and see if she could help him with the technical aspects he was less familiar with. After all, two heads were better than one, and Melissa's expertise could be the key to making this reactor a reality. But before he could hit the call button, Izuku looked at the time. It was already past midnight, the greenet sighed. "Fine, I will show her tomorrow." He had done more than he could ever expect to achieve in a single night. He earned some well-deserved rest. Izuku decided to keep his theory to himself until he had more concrete data and detailed schematics. It needed to be stable, not perfect, but stable, before he could present it to Melissa. He didn't want to burden her with an idea that was still being held together by duct tape and sheer willpower. Meanwhile, he had caught up with the Academy's rigorous standards, even managing to place among the top students in their group, just behind Melissa. It was a source of quiet pride for him. For once, he was excelling academically, and no one had ever accused him of cheating. However, there was one teacher, Samuel Abraham, with whom Izuku couldn't seem to find a rhythm. The man often gave him a neutral, calculating glance. Never aggressive or judgmental, just unsettling. Determined to push forward with his project, Izuku brought all his notes to the academy and asked Melissa if they could discuss his ideas during lunch. She read through everything in silence. Once, then twice, and finally a third time. It was a full month's worth of preparation and study condensed into those pages. When Melissa finally looked up, Izuku did his best to stay calm, resisting the urge to bombard her with questions. Melissa nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "It seems possible. You haven't tried anything on your own yet?" He shook his head. "No, but I have all the materials ready in my workshop. I wanted a second opinion first. I calculated everything assuming it could be implemented. With my project, a conductive fabric, the core handles the reaction, and the fabric conducts the output energy. It's a relay of field." Melissa's eyes lit up with realization. "Izuku, if we can make this work, it won't just be about the suit. It could be applied to so many things. It could change the world." "So, what's your opinion?" Izuku asked, his heart pounding with anticipation. Melissa paused, weighing her words. Either we're heading into a dead end, or we're on the verge of a discovery as groundbreaking as cold fusion. "What was the output you calculated?" "About 3 gigajoules per second, Izuku confirmed, glancing at his notes to double-check. "It's a lot, but it was the most stable combination I could come up with." Melissa handed back his notes, her mind already racing. "You handle the materials and the math. I'll take care of designing and crafting everything we need. I've got smaller hands, so I can work on the finer details." Izuku followed after her, unable to contain his excitement. "So, we're in business?" "Yes, in my workshop, together, as soon as classes are over. I'm out of welding tools, so make sure to bring one. And tell your mother you won't be home until we're done." "That won't be a problem," Izuku replied, a grin spreading across his face. This was it, the beginning of something incredible. They worked tirelessly through the night. It was Izuku's first time consuming caffeine, and he quickly realized it wasn't for him. He was already more than energetic enough without it. As Melissa had warned, they faced several cycles of trial and error, but with each attempt, they made incremental progress. By the time they reached the 5th iteration, both felt a growing sense of optimism. "It's almost midnight," Melissa noted, her voice tinged with fatigue. Let's fire this one up and then head to bed. She and Izuku carefully placed the unnamed core into a secured chamber, preparing for the crucial test. Would you do the honors? She asked, handing Izuku the remote. Let's hope I'll be remembered for more than just pushing a button, Izuku muttered, half joking. Hey, it could be worse. You could go down in history as the student who blew up someone's house, Melissa teased with a smirk. Or was she joking? Izuku wasn't entirely sure, but he shook off the thought and pressed the button. The lights in the room flickered, dimming noticeably. In fact, the entire house seemed to be drawing less power, though neither of them noticed at first. All their attention was focused on the reactor. It wasn't exploding. The readings were stable. It worked. They both stood in stunned silence for a full minute, staring at their creation with a mix of disbelief and awe. The reactor's temperature is perfect, just as you theorized, about 3 gigajoules, Melissa finally said, breaking the silence. The lights dimmed, though. The house's electrical network must have been overwhelmed. I'll disconnect the core. Izuku grabbed a laser thermometer to check the reactor's exterior temperature. It was about the same as the room's, cool enough to hold in his hand. It's surprisingly cold. I guess the cooling layer works even better than we thought. Let's try not to damage it. I need to take pictures and review the recording, Melissa advised. Izuku carefully placed the reactor back on its stand and helped her with the documentation. So, what are we naming it? I haven't really thought about that, Izuku admitted. Do we have to? Isn't that something for the marketing department? Unless you want them to name your invention something ridiculous like Puk, Melissa sighed. Izuku raised an eyebrow. I won't even ask if that's happened before. Do you have any suggestions? Well, Melissa mused, it's a miniaturized fusion reactor, something that could potentially power anything. It's a universal battery, a symbol of hope for the future. A source of energy that anyone can access, Izuku added. One energy source for everyone, Melissa continued, her eyes brightening with inspiration. Izuku scratched the back of his neck, pondering her words. How about one for all? Melissa looked at him, clearly impressed. Yes, that could work. The OFA reactor. Easy to pronounce, and as far as I know, the name isn't taken. I like it. Now all we have to do is run some more tests to ensure it works properly, and then we'll submit it to Professor Abraham. I can't wait to see his face, your first project, and you push humanity 2 centuries into the future. Don't get too carried away, Melissa, Izuku chuckled nervously. It's just a glorified car battery. Seems like I still need to work on your self-confidence, Melissa quipped, jotting down notes. Why are you taking notes for that? Izuku exclaimed, exasperated. Izuku returned home, ready to head straight to his room, careful not to disturb his mother. She had been working tirelessly on documents sent by David, and although she worked from home, her days were just as exhausting as his. It wasn't uncommon for her to fall asleep on the couch, so Izuku had made it a habit to tread lightly. However, tonight was different. She was awake, and they had a guest. They told us to destroy everything. We'll only get 1/10 of the pay, and that's only if the entire project is censored. It was David's voice, laced with frustration. Izuku stopped in his tracks, staying hidden from view. We invested too much in this only to be betrayed like this. It's like all these months of research mean nothing to them. The anger in David's tone was palpable, making it a surprise that he hadn't shattered something nearby. We got scammed. And there's nothing we can do about it without starting an actual war. Let's look at this from another angle, Inko suggested, her voice calm but serious. The headset is still on Island. They have no access to the schematics or your research notes, and they can't prove that you've destroyed everything. And I can't just sell it to another country. David's voice wavered. It was supposed to address a medical issue. If I hadn't received this notice, I could have triggered an international conflict. I'm such an idiot. If you make the project public, Inko reasoned, Japan might be isolated, and whoever financed the research wouldn't be able to retaliate. But other countries would try to get their hands on it for their own gain or make the same demands. I wish I could help you find a way to salvage the results, Inko continued, But there's no clear procedure for handling international conflicts over products or research files. Not that I'm aware of, anyway. Forget it. Thank you, Ingo. I just needed someone to talk to. Abraham didn't take it well. He's the only other person who knows about this project. He's my friend. We started this whole thing together. Island is our greatest achievement, and we thought this was the next step. He won't do anything reckless, will he? No, not Abraham. He's not that kind of person. At least, I hope not. David sighed, pouring himself a glass of water. I told Melissa today that things were about to change. Now I feel like a liar. Inko got up from the couch and moved closer to David. You couldn't have known what those people would do. You worked with the Japanese government because they were willing to finance everything. The only thing you've lost is money, not time. You've made so many discoveries along the way, and those can never be taken from you. The device you created is exceptional, but that doesn't mean someone else won't be able to make something similar in, 10 years? Just tell them you destroyed everything but keep your research. Use it. Yes, that's the best I can do for now, David agreed, a hint of resolve returning to his voice. But not yet. The Japanese government will be watching us closely. We need to wait until they lose interest. I don't want to deal with black ops on my island. Unlike an actual country, we don't have heroes to protect us. Izuku had been eavesdropping for too long. He had heard more than enough, maybe even too much. Quietly, he slipped away and made his way to his bedroom, determined to pretend he hadn't overheard the conversation. But as he lay in bed, thoughts racing, one thing became clear. If their project was as revolutionary as Melissa had suggested, maybe they could turn the tables in their favor. Izuku resolved to pour everything he had into perfecting the OFA reactor. It wasn't just a project anymore. It was a lifeline. Nothing was ever as simple as it seemed. David's mood began to seep into Melissa, and Izuku, feeling the weight of his partner's distress, knew he couldn't keep what he overheard to himself. After some hesitation, he confessed to her about the late-night conversation between his mother and her father. Melissa was stunned, her initial shock quickly morphing into anger. What could my father have been working on for so long, only to be betrayed at the last moment? She demanded, but Izuku could only shrug. The only detail he knew was that it was something to do with a headset. Melissa frowned. A headset? He never mentioned anything about that. And my dad's not exactly secretive. Whatever this project was, it must have been really important. Izuku could see the determination growing in Melissa's eyes, and before he could say anything, she blurted out, "We have to succeed. We have to help my father." I thought the same thing, Izuku agreed, feeling the same sense of urgency. "We should tell him everything," she said. Izuku hesitated. He's already dealing with so much. Maybe we shouldn't bother him with a project that hasn't even reached the testing phase yet. Melissa's shoulders slumped in reluctant agreement. "You're right, but we need to make some changes. You said he was worried about Japan sending operatives to raid the island and steal secrets." He didn't say it exactly like that, but yeah, that's the gist of it. "Then we should use that to our advantage," Melissa said, her voice hardening with resolve. In the past, nuclear bombs weren't just weapons, they were deterrents. We can do the same. What? Izuku blinked, caught off guard. Nowadays, we fight quirk with quirk, but we can make the difference. They overestimate us, they always do. "Melissa, you're taking this too far," Izuku interjected, his voice firm. "No, I'm not." Melissa's tone was resolute. "Do you know how much my father has gone through because of me? No one expects anything from his quirkless daughter, but I want to prove them wrong. I want to continue his legacy, to show that anyone can accomplish something great if they work hard enough. What the Japanese government did will not go unpunished. So you can either help me, or you can stay silent and accept whatever they throw at you." Izuku felt a pang in his chest, like something between them had been strained, maybe even broken. But he knew this wasn't the real Melissa speaking. This was the Melissa who would go to the ends of the earth for the people she cared about. And he wasn't a coward. "I'll help you, Melissa," he said softly. "But I'll also protect you from yourself. We're not making a weapon, we're making a shield. Do we agree on that?" If you ended up suffering because of our creation, I would never be able to forgive myself. Melissa moved closer, leaning against him. You won't let me down? No, I'm here, Izuku replied, feeling a surge of confidence that was unfamiliar yet comforting. He hadn't meant to echo All Might's catchphrase. It disgusted him to think about the man who had once been his idol. But these words, in this moment, felt right. They were his own, filled with sincerity. Melissa chuckled, clearly catching the reference. Then, to Izuku's surprise, she pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. His body went rigid with shock, but she just laughed. Come on, let's get to work. We have a lot to change. Izuku wished this moment could last forever, that things would never change between them. The first version of the reactor was only meant to be a temporary prototype, a proof of concept. Izuku was about to dismantle it when Melissa stopped him. You should keep it, she said. It's our first creation. Not the final draft, but still important. You think so? Izuku asked, unsure. Of course, Melissa replied with confidence. One day, when you're at your lowest, you might look at it and think, yes, I did it once, and I can still do it. She was right as always. Melissa would keep the subsequent versions of the reactor in her workshop, while Izuku would hold onto the original in his own. I don't mind if you keep it as a trophy, she added with a grin. I have enough of my own. Izuku smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest that he hadn't felt in a long time. This was more than just a project. It was a testament to their partnership, their shared dreams, and the unspoken bond that had grown between them. The fabric that Izuku had brought back from Japan was used as planned, though not exactly in the way they initially intended. Melissa had to rethink the entire design system after showing Izuku an old sci-fi movie she had found in her father's office. The film depicted humans using combat suits to fight, a concept that intrigued them despite the impracticality of fitting so much technology into such a small space. But the special fabric used for Mount Lady's suit opened up new possibilities. Instead of using traditional cables and wires, they could create what Melissa dubbed, reluctantly at first, the first ever motherboard fabric. It was a crude name, but it would do until they had time to focus on details. The fabric would be worn as a jumpsuit, with the human pilot encased in metal, while the special fabric would relay information between the pilot and various parts of the suit. It was flexible enough to resist minor external damage and significantly reduced the space needed to make the suit functional. For the exterior, Izuku began to model an iron armature. He had already planned out the gadgets he wanted to add, designing the suit to be modular, allowing for flexibility and the ability to be restructured by anyone who understood the technology. It was like adding mods to a game, a suit that could adapt and evolve. As another month passed, Melissa kept a close eye on her father, who still hadn't fully processed the betrayal by the Japanese government. Meanwhile, in class, Izuku noticed that Professor Samuel Abraham, David's partner and their applicable projects professor, was frequently absent. When he was present, his mood was increasingly dour. With just 1 month left to finish the suit, Izuku insisted they move on to practical testing. Naturally, he volunteered as the test pilot. Equipped with thrusters on each limb connected to the suit's inner armature, he prepared for his first attempt at flight. Just a second, I need to make sure the reactor is connected correctly, Melissa said as she made final adjustments. I'm not moving until you tell me it's all clear, Izuku replied, standing firm. Worst case scenario, we all burn and meet in the afterlife, or in the next occurrence of reality, Melissa quipped. You skipped the previous injuries and all the other things that might scare me. You're making progress, Melissa, Izuku said, glancing over his shoulder to see Melissa jotting down notes in her infamous psychology carnet. Can you stop? He asked, half exasperated. Sorry, your reactions are just priceless, Melissa replied with a grin. She finished strapping the reactor to Izuku and moved a few feet away. If you catch on fire, I've got an extinguisher ready. Only if I catch on fire. Okay, let's start with 10% move, Izuku said, stretching and bracing himself for takeoff. Are we recording? Melissa gave a thumbs up. All set. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Izuku hit the trigger, and the propulsion was so strong it sent him rocketing upward, slamming into the ceiling before crashing down onto the floor. Melissa panicked and immediately blasted him with the extinguisher. I am not on fire. Cold. Cold! Izuku shouted, flailing as the freezing foam covered him. Melissa stopped, realizing her mistake. Izuku, are you hurt? Stop moving already. I'm fine really. More surprised than hurt, I promise. Guess even 10% is too much for a single liftoff. Let's try a test that doesn't involve human subjects, alright? Melissa suggested, her voice shaking slightly. They quickly rigged up a single thruster to a fake arm, which they secured to a table. How about 3% this time? Izuku proposed. Recording has started. Your move, Melissa confirmed. Here goes Noth. As soon as Izuku pressed the trigger, the arm tore free from its bindings and shot across the room, embedding itself in the wall. ING. Let's try that with 1%. We're out of straps. I'll try again. 1% should be 10 times less intense than 10%, right? That's easy math. Ta. Izuku's nervous laughter didn't exactly inspire confidence. Don't record this one just in case. If someone finds this, I'll never hear the end of it. If you feel like attempting to fly again, sure. Despite his request, Melissa quietly started recording once Izuku was back in the HRTS. Attempt number 3, your move, Izuku. Easy liftoff. Izuku closed his eyes and cringed as he pressed the trigger. This time, the suit carefully lifted him off the ground instead of slamming him into the ceiling. I am flying. It works. Don't stop. Try to navigate around the room. Melissa was ecstatic, her excitement bubbling over. Izuku, on the other hand, was less enthused. He awkwardly flailed his arms, trying to control his direction but ended up careening wildly around the room like a human tornado, knocking over equipment and tools. It took him a minute to find his balance, but once he did, he began to move more comfortably around the space. You're getting the hang of it, Melissa noted, her eyes sparkling with pride. It's about using all our limbs. You want to try? Izuku offered, still a bit shaky but more confident. I feared you'd never ask. Melissa was a quick learner, and her confidence made all the difference. Within 5 minutes, she was performing flips mid-air. This will be so much better once the suit is complete. Though I'm concerned about how much control we'll actually need to manipulate the suit. What do you mean? Izuku asked, hovering nearby. Linking someone's brain activity to a machine is hard, really hard. And depending on who uses the suit, it needs specific adjustments. Each human is different. Izuku nodded. You can't just put 2 people inside the same armor, though. They had hit another obstacle. Can't we use machine learning? Trigger specific motions based on specific movements. No, but maybe. We could design a basic artificial intelligence to operate the suit's subsystems and assist the user's movements. I'm not very skilled in that field, though, and it's the only solution I can think of. Then I'll study it, Izuku decided. The suit's inner parts are mostly done, and you have more experience in this field. He gestured to the deep-diving suit Melissa had designed herself. Let me handle that. As the days passed, they pushed forward with renewed determination. The obstacles were daunting, but together, they were unstoppable. Melissa was in awe, feeling as if she were floating on a cloud. Her heart raced as she processed the shift in her relationship with Izuku. A part of her mind screamed that she was foolish, that she was letting emotions cloud her judgment, that developing feelings for her lab partner just because they were both quirkless was a mistake. She had always prided herself on being logical, on not letting emotions interfere with her work. But she couldn't help it. Izuku was special, brilliant, kind, and selfless, qualities she had never encountered in anyone else. Screw her doubts. Izuku was a miracle in her life. They were each other's guardian angels, and she was determined not to let anything ruin that. Feeling emboldened by their deepening bond and the success of their project, Melissa decided it was finally time to talk to her father. The testing phases were progressing smoothly, and the external layer of the suit was fully modeled. Despite the recent stress of exams, everything was on track. She couldn't wait to see the look on her father's face when he saw what they had created. As Melissa ascended the stairs to her father's office, her heart thudded in her chest. She paused outside the door, hearing raised voices from within. Her father's partner, Samuel Abraham, sounded furious, his voice a harsh rasp that grated against her nerves. "Just get it out. I haven't wasted 2 years of my life working tirelessly to get absolutely no profit. People need money to live." Her father's voice was a mix of frustration and exhaustion, laced with an edge of authority she rarely heard. "Oh, please, don't use that excuse with me. You're not making any sense, Samuel. We're already rich. Just look around you. I don't care. It was my prestige, my magnum opus. You can't just take it away from me." Melissa's stomach churned. She had never heard Samuel so unhinged, so desperate. "Don't you think I'm just as pained as you are?" David's voice softened, but it was no less firm. "There's nothing else to do. We're doing the right thing, and that's all that matters. Now, unless you have constructive criticism to offer, I'll ask you as your superior to leave my office." The door flung open, and Samuel stormed out, his face twisted with anger. He locked eyes with Melissa, his gaze hard and cold. She stood frozen, the intensity of his stare sending a chill down her spine. He brushed past her without a word, his presence lingering like a dark cloud even after he was gone. Melissa felt a knot tighten in her chest, a mix of fear and disdain coiling within her. Steeling herself, she knocked softly on the still open door. "Hey, Dad." David looked up, his expression softening as he saw his daughter. But the weariness in his eyes was unmistakable. "Melissa, I'm really busy right now." Melissa took a deep breath, pushing aside her anxiety. "Your secret project with Japan? It's fine. I know about it. And no, I didn't eavesdrop, and I won't tell you how I found out." David's face paled. "Sunshine, it's not what you think. I just wanted to tell you that I'm proud of your decision. And that Izuku and I have something to show you." David hesitated, clearly torn between his work and his daughter. Finally, he sighed, rubbing his temples as if to ward off a headache. "Fine, I need a break anyway. What do you want to show me?" Melissa led him downstairs to the basement, her heart pounding with anticipation. The room was still a mess, tools and scraps of metal scattered across the floor, remnants of their late-night work sessions. She felt a flush of embarrassment as her father surveyed the chaotic scene. "What happened here?" David asked, his voice tinged with concern. Melissa laughed nervously. "Oh, science." She opened the containment unit, revealing the OFA reactor. She watched her father's face intently, her breath catching in her throat as his expression shifted from confusion to shock, and finally, to amazement. David approached the reactor like a man approaching a holy relic. His fingers trembled as he reached out, then pulled back, afraid to touch it. His mind raced, trying to comprehend what he was seeing. The design. It's not even hot. How did you? Oh, you and Izuku? But that's what isotopes and? How are you cooling down the? Then he collapsed into the chair Melissa offered him, his legs unable to support him any longer. Melissa felt a swell of pride and relief as she watched her father struggle to find words. It was Izuku's idea at first, a universal power source, but he wanted to use it for my suit project. It's evolved so much since the beginning that it's hardly recognizable. David looked up at her, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "What are you making?" "A power armor." "Come again." Melissa's heart pounded as she spoke, the words spilling out in a rush. "I know you're afraid that if word gets out about what you created, and if Island is attacked, there might not be a hero strong enough to stop the villains. But with our creation, anyone can reach that level, even quirkless people. This armor negates the gap between someone with a strong quirk and someone with little power." David's expression darkened with worry. "Melissa, I want to help people, Dad. I've never stopped trying." Melissa's voice trembled slightly, but she held her ground. "I'm not afraid of finishing this project and showing it to the world. This technology is ours, we're not sharing it. We're reaching out to help people. And if anyone dares to take it for themselves, they'll have to fight for it." David shivered, his heart aching with a mix of fear and pride. His daughter. She understood the stakes, and she was willing to go to war if necessary. It terrified him, the thought of her in danger, of the battles she might face. But at the same time, he had never been prouder. Melissa was strong, determined, and incredibly brave. And Izuku, that clever, kind boy. What a miracle he was. They had found each other at the perfect time, and together, they were creating something extraordinary. "I am so proud of you, Melissa," David whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Your mother would be too. She's watching, I'm certain. Can you feel it?" Melissa's throat tightened with emotion. She could feel her father's pride radiating toward her, warming her from the inside out. Yes, Dad, I feel it." But as father and daughter shared this quiet moment of triumph, neither of them noticed the shadow lurking in the background. Samuel had never actually left the house. Hidden away, he had overheard Melissa's conversation with her father. His mind raced with dark possibilities. The girl was out of his reach, too resolute and strong-willed. But the boy, if whatever they had created was as powerful as it seemed, then perhaps not all was lost. A sinister smile crept onto Samuel's face as he slipped away, already plotting his next move. Izuku had no idea where to start. Melissa had sent him to the Academy's archives with no specific instructions, only a vague mention that he needed to research something crucial for their project. The task of contributing to the creation of an artificial intelligence system for their suit loomed over him. A task that felt insurmountable, given that he barely knew anything about scripting or programming. "Why did I say I would handle this part again?" he muttered to himself, feeling a knot of anxiety tighten in his chest as he wandered through the towering shelves of books and digital files. The sheer volume of information was overwhelming. So many topics, so many possibilities, and yet, no clear path. It felt like being lost in a dense forest without a map. After what seemed like hours of aimless searching, Izuku finally stumbled upon the section on programming and coding languages. The titles alone were intimidating: Advanced Neural Networks, AI Programming for Robotics, and Quantum Computing, the Next Frontier. He sighed heavily, pulling a few beginner-looking friendly guides from the shelves. His hands trembled slightly as he clutched the books to his chest, feeling the weight of the challenge ahead. Finding a quiet corner of the archives, Izuku settled into a chair and opened a book titled Introduction to Artificial Intelligence. The first few chapters were straightforward enough, covering basic concepts like what AI was, its potential, and the ethical considerations surrounding it. But it wasn't long before he hit a wall of unfamiliar terminology: algorithms, machine learning, deep learning, neural networks. Each term felt like a boulder blocking his path, and the more he tried to climb over them, the more they seemed to grow. "Okay, focus," Izuku told himself, trying to push aside the rising tide of panic. He pulled out a notebook and began jotting down key terms and definitions, forcing himself to take the information in small, digestible pieces. "If I'm going to build an AI, I need to start with the basics," he reminded himself, though the words felt hollow in the face of his uncertainty. The more he read, the more he realized that creating a fully functional AI from scratch was far beyond his current abilities. It was like trying to scale a mountain with no climbing gear. But then, a thought struck him. He didn't have to start from nothing. Maybe he could find an existing framework and build on it, tweaking and adapting it to suit their needs. The idea gave him a small glimmer of hope, a foothold in the otherwise daunting task ahead. His thoughts drifted back to the project at hand, the armored suit. The AI needed to assist the user in combat situations, monitor vital signs, analyze threats, and even control various suit functions. It had to be fast, responsive, and capable of learning and adapting to the user's preferences and combat style. The more he thought about it, the more his mind raced with possibilities, but each idea also carried a weight of doubt. "I need something simple but scalable," he mused aloud, flipping through another book. The words felt like a lifeline, something solid to hold on to in the vast ocean of uncertainty. And then he found it, a section on basic AI assistance. The text explained how simple AI systems, like virtual assistants or basic chatbots, were programmed. These systems used natural language processing and machine learning to interact with users and perform tasks. It wasn't as advanced as what he envisioned for the suit, but it was a start. His heart leaped slightly, the first real spark of excitement he'd felt since beginning his research. If I can get the AI to understand basic commands and gather data, I can build from there, Izuku thought, a sense of determination beginning to take root. He began sketching out a rough plan, his hand moving quickly as ideas flowed more freely. Learn the basics of coding. He would start by mastering a coding language frequently used in AI development, like Python. Melissa had recommended it for its simplicity and versatility. Create a basic AI framework. Using what he learned, he would build a simple AI that could perform basic tasks, like recognizing voice commands, processing simple data, and interacting with the user. Implement machine learning. Once the basic AI was functional, he would dive into machine learning, enabling the AI to learn from interactions and improve its responses over time, adapting to the user's needs and preferences. Integrate with the suit. The final step would be integrating the AI with the suit systems, allowing it to control various functions and provide real-time feedback to the user. As he wrote, a renewed sense of purpose filled him. It wouldn't be easy, nothing worth doing ever was, but at least now he had a plan, a direction. The fog of uncertainty began to lift as he spent the rest of the day buried in books, taking notes, and beginning to code his first simple AI model on the Academy's computers. Hours passed in a blur, the outside world fading away as Izuku lost himself in the process. He was still a long way from creating the sophisticated AI that would power the suit, but this was a start. He was learning, experimenting, and slowly, but surely, gaining confidence in his ability to tackle the challenges ahead. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the archives in a warm, golden glow, Izuku stretched, feeling the ache in his muscles from sitting too long. He glanced around and realized he was the only one left in the vast, silent room. A mix of exhaustion and satisfaction washed over him. He had made progress today, real progress, and that was something to be proud of. Just as he began packing up his notes, a hand suddenly stopped him from gathering a few loose papers. Izuku's heart skipped a beat as he looked up, startled. As studious as ever, Midoriya. I admire your dedication. Izuku's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the voice. Professor Abraham. Good. He glanced out the window, noting the darkening sky. Evening already? Yes, quite, Samuel Abraham replied, his tone amiable, though something in his eyes made Izuku uneasy. What are you working on? Many students have already submitted their projects. I believe you're partnering with S.H.I.E.L.D., aren't you? Why, yes, sir. Izuku felt a sudden wave of discomfort, a sense of dread gnawing at the edges of his mind. There was something off about Professor Abraham, something that didn't sit right with him. But he couldn't put his finger on it. He did his best to brush off the feeling, reminding himself that Samuel was David's partner and could be trusted. He wasn't like the teachers at Aldera, who had always made him feel small and insignificant. So why did he feel so uneasy? We're still working on the theory, he added, trying to keep his voice steady. Oh, but I thought Melissa showed it to her father already. Samuel's words made Izuku freeze. Did she? If Samuel knew, then... I had to leave early, so I couldn't see it, but when I saw you, I thought you could give me more details. I might even be able to help. I am a professor after all. Izuku's mind raced, trying to figure out what to say. WL. At the moment, I'm working on artificial intelligence. The subject is quite new to me. It's related to our project because we need something to passively assist the user when they interact with our device. Samuel raised an eyebrow, his interest clearly piqued. Device? Oh, I must see it. How about you let me inside your workshop? I don't delve into favoritism, but I really want to push you all to the top. The professor's insistence sent a cold shiver down Izuku's spine, but he found himself nodding despite the unease. He couldn't muster the strength to say no, especially not to a professor. So, he led Samuel to his workshop, making sure to avoid Melissa's space. She wouldn't appreciate him letting someone else, even a professor, spy on their work. Well, that's the first draft, Izuku said, gesturing to the original reactor displayed inside a glass case. Samuel took a long look at it, his expression unreadable. If he was impressed, he hid it well. The first draft. Weiss, Izuku stammered, his nerves fraying under the professor's intense gaze. I keep it as a souvenir. Melissa is keeping the others in a safe containment unit. And not that they're unstable. But you never know what could happen. Samuel nodded, appearing to agree with Izuku's caution. The student showed him some of his notes, trying to distract him from the discomfort gnawing at him, but Samuel's eyes wandered to the blueprints scattered on a nearby table. His gaze lingered on the drawings, a calculating gleam in his eyes that sent another chill down Izuku's spine. What do you think, Professor? Izuku asked, trying to keep the conversation focused on his work and away from whatever sinister thoughts might be running through Samuel's mind. I believe you have everything handled, Samuel replied, his voice laced with something that made Izuku's skin crawl. You've created something that will change the world. I sincerely hope you continue on this path. There was an unmistakable note of truth in Samuel's words, though it was tinged with a darkness that Izuku couldn't quite place. The professor clearly hoped that Izuku and Melissa would keep upgrading their designs, but for what purpose? Izuku wasn't sure he wanted to know. I will, Izuku stammered, his heart pounding in his chest as he forced a smile. Thank you, Professor. Samuel's eyes flicked back to the blueprints before he finally turned to leave. I'll let you rest. I need some myself. Good evening, Midoriya. Good night, Professor. Izuku called after him, relief washing over him as Samuel left the workshop. But the sense of dread lingered, clinging to him like a shadow. Something wasn't right, but he couldn't figure out what. As he packed up his things and prepared to leave, he couldn't shake the feeling that Professor Abraham had seen more than he let on, and that he had plans of his own. Samuel locked himself into his office, the cold steel door clicking shut with an ominous finality. The soft glow of his monitor was the only light in the room, casting long shadows that seemed to dance on the walls, mirroring the dark thoughts swirling in his mind. He knew better than to connect directly to Island's network, too many prying eyes and ears, so he routed his communication through a series of encrypted channels, ensuring absolute discretion. Finally, the screen flickered, and the words, audio only, appeared. Samuel smirked. He didn't need to see her face to know who he was dealing with. Miss President, he began, his voice smooth, almost too casual given the gravity of what he was about to propose. Professor Abraham, what owes me the pleasure of receiving your call this early in the morning? Her voice was crisp, professional, with a sharp edge that hinted at her no-nonsense attitude. Samuel leaned back in his chair, fingers drumming lightly on the desk. I believe I can help you obtain what you longing while ensuring David takes the fall for any incident that may occur in the process. He let his words hang in the air, a baited hook, waiting for the inevitable bite. The silence on the other end was palpable, tense, as if she were weighing every possible outcome. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke. Her tone now colder, more calculated. You can get us the headset and the schematics? A satisfied grin spread across Samuel's face. Of course. In exchange, I will be offered asylum in Japan and a comfortable retreat. As a gesture of goodwill, I'll even offer my services as a bonus. His voice was confident, the tone of a man who knew he was negotiating from a position of power. If such an operation fails, it will have huge repercussions on us, the president replied, her skepticism evident. What are your guarantees? Samuel's grin faded slightly, but his resolve did not waver. He knew he had to convince her, had to make her see that he was their best, no, their only, option. I can turn Island's security system against itself, he said, his voice low, almost a whisper, as if he were sharing a deadly secret. There are no heroes here, only tourists and scientists. They will be completely defenseless. Another pause, shorter this time, as the president considered his words. So all you ask of us is to provide the muscle? There was a faint hint of intrigue in her voice now, a sign that she was warming to his proposal. That can be arranged, she continued. Now, let's talk about the details. As the conversation shifted to logistics and planning, Samuel's mind raced ahead, already picturing the chaos he would unleash, the power he would wield, and the safe, comfortable life that awaited him far from the ruins he would leave behind. He knew there was no turning back now. He had set things in motion that could not be undone. But that was the thrill of it, wasn't it? To play the game, to manipulate the pieces on the board, to emerge victorious no matter the cost. As the discussion continued, Samuel couldn't help but feel a rush of exhilaration. He was on the brink of something monumental, something that would change everything. And for the first time in a long while, Samuel felt like he was the leader of his own project. With less than a month remaining before the big reveal of their project, Izuku and Melissa had made tremendous progress. David had granted himself an unlimited budget, determined to keep the OFA reactor as secretive as possible. They couldn't do much about Abraham, who was already aware of its existence, but the professor had remained oddly silent since his last encounter with David. David, the director of I-Island, pinned his hopes on his daughter's project to fix everything: the island's wounded pride, his fractured friendship with Abraham, and, most importantly, his own past mistakes. He often found himself marveling at how none of this would have happened without Izuku Midoriya, the Wonder Boy, as some of the Academy's teachers had begun calling him. In a pre-quirk era, developing this kind of technology would have taken decades, but somehow, Izuku and Melissa were on track to complete it in under 4 months, perhaps even 3 if they pushed themselves. David's daughter was right. He had paved the way for a brighter future, even if he hadn't yet shared any major breakthroughs with the world. Like many great minds before him, he was caught in an eternal sea whistle of caution and ambition. But beneath his lack of confidence and ever-present fear, a genius was emerging. The Midoriyas had done more for his island in a short time than he could have imagined. Inko Midoriya was far more competent than any of the overpriced attorneys who refused to work directly on the island. She was clever and cunning. Like her son, she hid her true capabilities. They might not be able to do much against the might of Japan, but now they would be prepared for any future unpleasant surprises. Today, however, was different. Their latest exam week had just passed, and Melissa had invited Izuku for his first ever diving session, a well-earned rest. Inko had given her approval, reassured by Melissa's experience and the drones patrolling the area that would monitor them at all times. Yet, she couldn't shake a bit of anxiety. Her son, who seemed like a fish fresh out of his bowl, would be going into the depths of the sea. Meanwhile, Melissa had managed to convince Izuku that he needed to get her father's permission to go diving with her. This, of course, allowed her some time alone with Izuku's mother. She leaned forward, a playful smile tugging at her lips. "I sent him to ask my father about his approval." "Do you think that was mean?" she asked, her voice light with amusement but tinged with a hint of concern. Inko chuckled softly, recognizing how well Melissa had come to understand her son. "On the contrary, it shows how far he's willing to go for you," she replied, her tone affectionate. "But do try not to abuse that trust." Melissa's eyes softened, sincerity replacing the playful glint. "I never would," she assured, her voice firm but gentle. "We've been working so hard lately. It was time we did something other than flying test runs around my workshop." She paused, a sheepish smile crossing her face. "Which reminds me, I really need to clean up the place eventually." "David told me you recorded everything," Inko interjected, curiosity sparkling in her eyes. "May I watch the test someday?" Melissa brightened at the request, her enthusiasm bubbling over. "You have to. The first test at 10% was priceless. He scared me so badly. I may or may not have sprayed him with a fire extinguisher, even though he wasn't on fire." Inko laughed, a warm, motherly sound. "Better safe than sorry, huh? But he wasn't hurt, was he?" "He's surprisingly sturdy," Melissa admitted, a note of admiration in her voice. Her brow furrowed slightly, pondering. "Are you sure he doesn't have some hidden, very passive quirk?" Inko shook her head, a wistful smile playing at her lips. "No, I trust the doctor who diagnosed him. They're rude, grumpy, and don't care much for others' feelings, but they're good at what they do. Izuku is quirkless. The world has a funny way of creating people." Melissa grinned, but her scientific mind couldn't help but resist. "Oh, you won't convince me about some grand universal design that no one can truly understand. I'm a scientist, I work with facts." Inko raised an eyebrow, leaning slightly closer. "All right then. Fact, you met Izuku." Melissa blinked, momentarily speechless. She felt a warmth rise in her chest, unable, perhaps even unwilling, to counter Inko's statement. "I concede that you may be right," she murmured, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. Inko's smile widened. "You're a very smart girl, Melissa. Always trust your instincts. Now, I'm making katsudon tonight. You don't have any issues with fish, do you?" No, not at all," Melissa stammered, caught off guard. Then realization dawned on her face. "Oh, so that's the surprise my father was talking about, isn't it?" "Yes, dear," Inko confirmed, a playful twinkle in her eye. "And I'll also be trying pudding for the first time. I didn't know you grew vanilla here on the island. Powdered food is fine, but we're still human, and I'd rather eat something more natural." Melissa nodded in agreement, momentarily distracted by thoughts of the upcoming meal. But she quickly reminded herself that there were more important matters to attend to today. "You know how to swim, right?" Melissa's voice crackled through the suit's radio, tinged with a hint of playful curiosity. Izuku hesitated, a sheepish smile crossing his face. I learned the hard way, but yeah, I do. Are you worried you might have to watch me drown?" He tried to keep his tone light, but there was an underlying nervousness, the kind that came from diving into the unknown. Melissa chuckled softly, shaking her head, her blonde hair floating like a golden halo in the water. "Don't put dark ideas in my head. You're wearing my own deep-diving suit, remember? It's highly resistant. You could breathe underwater for an entire week if you didn't need to eat or, take a bathroom break." Her eyes sparkled with mischief. Izuku laughed, a bit more relaxed now. "Nothing is perfect, but that's amazing to think it can last so long. I wonder if we'll find any treasures down here." He glanced around, his emerald eyes wide with wonder as the ocean seemed to stretch endlessly around them. Melissa's grin widened. "You're dreaming of old Spanish galleons lost somewhere in the depths, loaded with gold and jewels just waiting to be discovered? Wouldn't you?" Izuku's excitement was palpable, his voice bright with the endless possibilities that lay beneath the waves. She pretended to think for a moment. "We could find them, I suppose, if we had a large-scale sonar and enough satellites to cover the whole Atlantic Ocean. But assuming you could train an AI to identify shipwrecks, speaking of which, how's our co-pilot project coming along?" Her tone shifted, becoming more focused, but still carrying that friendly edge. Izuku scratched the back of his head, cheeks flushing slightly behind his suit's visor. "Oh, I'm planning to start it up tonight. I think it's ready. I was running low on funds, and Professor Abraham approved my request for resources himself. I thought your dad would handle it, but he's been keeping such a close eye on everything we're doing. I wonder if—" His voice trailed off, a frown creasing his brow. Melissa's eyes narrowed with concern. "Did you show Abraham our work?" Izuku quickly shook his head. "Only what was in my workshop, I promise. I'd never let anyone into yours, especially since that's where the most important stuff is kept." His voice was earnest, tinged with anxiety. Melissa pressed further, her tone growing more serious. "Did he pressure you?" Izuku hesitated, glancing away. "And no, he has a certain aura, you know? Plus, he's a professor. I can't just act casually around him like I would with you or your father." Melissa's gaze bore into his, unyielding. "I'll ask again, Izuku. Ignoring your discomfort, did you feel like Professor Abraham was overly insistent on seeing our project?" Izuku met her gaze for a moment before his resolve crumbled, and he looked down, guilt and frustration evident in his features. "I'm impressionable," he admitted softly. Melissa's expression softened, her voice gentle but firm. "Everyone is, Izuku. But you learned the lesson, and even though you made a mistake, you brought him to your workshop, not mine. He didn't see everything." Izuku chuckled, a bit more at ease. "You talk like he's some evil rival scientist trying to steal our work." Melissa rolled her eyes playfully. "Because he's acting like one?" she quipped, a sly smile playing on her lips. Izuku couldn't help but grin. Fair enough." Melissa clapped her hands together, her demeanor shifting back to excitement. "All right, suit up. Those treasures aren't going to just float up to us." She moved closer to help him into the suit, her movements fluid and precise, a mix of gentle care and determination. Izuku felt a mix of gratitude and nervousness as Melissa adjusted his gear, her hands moving quickly with a practiced efficiency. The suit was surprisingly comfortable, not as heavy as he'd expected. "I see you've implemented some of our armor designs into this," he remarked, marveling at the propulsion devices on the feet and hands. Melissa nodded, a hint of pride in her eyes. "Up. Just clutch your toes and fingers to activate them. The harder you clutch, the stronger the push." Izuku blinked in surprise. "Then why did you ask if I could swim?" Melissa winked, a playful smirk dancing on her lips. "Planning for future outings." She gave him a final pat on the shoulder before diving into the ocean below with an effortless grace, her form disappearing beneath the waves. "See you on the other side," her voice echoed through the radio. Izuku watched her in awe, but after a few seconds, he noticed something was wrong. Melissa wasn't coming back up. His heart pounded in his chest. "Melissa?" he called out, panic creeping into his voice. "And Melissa?" Still no response. He took a deep breath, gathering his courage before jumping into the water. He plunged into the depths, searching frantically, his mind racing with terrifying possibilities. What if she hit something after she jumped? What if the suit malfunctioned? What if she ran out of oxygen? His thoughts spiraled until, "Gotcha!" Melissa's arms wrapped around him from behind, and she laughed through the radio. Izuku yelped in shock, his heart pounding. "And Melissa, I was so scared." He turned and hugged her tightly. "Can you not play with my feelings for just a few minutes?" Melissa giggled, giving him a light squeeze. "You jumped in to save me, didn't you? I heard you muttering in the suit. That's cute." Her voice was teasing, but her eyes softened with affection. "But I'm not a damsel in distress, Izuku. I know how to fight. I've taken martial arts classes, and Dad taught me how to use a gun. That's surprisingly mandatory in the US now." Izuku blinked, stunned. "Well, I wouldn't have guessed. You don't seem like the type who just flip someone and smash their head to the ground." Melissa smirked. "Great. That gives me the advantage of surprise." She grabbed his hand and began to pull him deeper into the ocean, leading him towards a vibrant coral valley. It was a kaleidoscope of colors, the marine life around them surreal and otherworldly. "What kind of gun can you use?" Izuku asked, genuinely curious. "Anything from a small pistol to a rifle. I'm not comfortable with automatic weapons, though. What about you? Any extracurricular activities?" Melissa inquired, glancing over at him with interest. Izuku chuckled, a bit embarrassed. "Nothing a quirkless kid could really do. I did apply for the chess club once, though. I got an email saying my application had to be approved by a member of the club, then they sent me a date and room number at school." Melissa raised an eyebrow, amused. "Let me guess, it was a joke, right?" Izuku shrugged, a wry smile on his face. "I'll let you guess what those idiots had planned." Melissa laughed, then glanced around, checking the surroundings. No puffer fish in sight. "Took me forever to learn how dangerous those little guys are." Izuku nodded. "Yeah, they're poisonous. In Japan, chefs need a special license to prepare them, and everything's stored in a biohazard unit. It's crazy to think a living creature can carry such deadly toxins." Melissa grinned. "Ever watched Alien by Ridley Scott?" Izuku shuddered. I did, and I really hate tentacles, and aliens, especially when they're depicted like that. It's kind of unfair, right? If aliens do find us someday and see that movie, how do you think they'll react?" Melissa laughed, her voice warm. "Counterpoint. We do make a distinction between monsters and sentient beings. I think the movie was more about showing the dangers of space exploration and why scientists need to follow protocols. Until they don't, and all hell breaks loose." Izuku interrupted, his voice rising in excitement. "Sure, let's go into the alien ship without any equipment. Sure, let's touch the unidentified egg. Sure, let's bring back the body with a weird parasite on his face." Melissa giggled. "Spoilers, Izuku." Izuku rolled his eyes playfully. "But you've seen it. Who else is listening? The fish?" Maybe the octopus out here feels offended too. Melissa's expression brightened with an idea. They are the most alien creatures on Earth, you know. What if we made a tentacle harness someone could control with their mind? Izuku blinked, bemused. Why would you even need that? Melissa smirked. I need more arms to work. Izuku laughed, shaking his head. You've already got 2. Plus, the human brain isn't exactly built for multitasking. Melissa opened her mouth to respond, but she suddenly froze, her face twisting in surprise. Izuku, come here. Oh, I can't believe we found something like this. Izuku swam to her side quickly, his heart pounding with curiosity. They hovered near a chasm, bubbles rising to the surface, creating an ethereal display of shimmering lights. There must be volcanic activity nearby, Melissa muttered excitedly. I should alert the weather station team. Izuku gazed down in wonder. It's like a giant chimney, a natural one. He leaned closer to the edge to get a better view of the chasm below. I can almost feel the heat. Melissa handed him a small rock. Here, drop this. As Izuku released the rock, they watched as it glowed red, like a meteorite re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. Do you have more stones to drop? He asked, fascinated. Melissa laughed. Actually, I have other plans for our underwater explorat. Her sentence was cut off as her eyes widened in shock. Izuku's senses went on high alert, a cold shiver running down his spine. He felt a disturbance in the water, something massive looming just behind them. Without thinking, he lunged toward Melissa, grabbing her arm as he activated the suit's propulsors, propelling them both away with a sudden burst of speed. As they moved, Izuku glanced back over his shoulder, his heart pounding wildly. A monstrous mechanical drone, its body resembling a giant spider, hovered just above where they had been moments before. It was at least 4 meters wide, with 8 articulated arms bristling with drill bits, saws, and pincers. The whirring of its servos and the low hum of its engines sent a wave of vibrations through the water, making the ocean feel alive with danger. What is that? Izuku shouted over the radio, eyes wide with fear and confusion. Melissa's voice trembled slightly, a mix of fear and disbelief. It's a mining bot, but it shouldn't be active at this time of day. They only use these things for deep-sea excavation. Something's wrong, really wrong. The drone emitted a loud, grating siren that echoed through the water, sending schools of fish darting away in panic. Its eyes, bright red sensors, locked onto them like a predator spotting prey. Without warning, it surged forward with a speed that belied its size, kicking up a cloud of silt and debris in its wake. We need to get back to the island. It's out of control. Melissa ordered, urgency seeping into her tone. They kicked their legs, pushing their suit's propulsion systems to their limits. But no matter how fast they moved, the drone was faster, its mechanical limbs clawing through the water with terrifying precision. We're not going to make it at this rate. Izuku called out, panic seeping into his voice. He could feel his muscles tightening, his breaths coming in short, ragged gasps. The drone was gaining on them, its serrated arms reaching out like the claws of a monstrous sea spider. Melissa scanned their surroundings rapidly, her mind racing. Change of plan. Follow me, she shouted, spotting a jagged formation of rocks jutting up from the ocean floor like the spine of a giant sea creature. It's too tight for the drone. We can lose it there. Izuku nodded, not daring to waste a second. They dove toward the rocks, squeezing through a narrow crevice just as one of the drone's massive arms swiped through the space they had occupied a moment before. The drone emitted another ear-splitting siren, the grinding of its mechanical joints filling the water with an eerie vibration. It clawed at the rocks, trying to force its way through the narrow passage, but the space was too tight, the jagged stone gouging at its metal exterior. We bought ourselves a few seconds. Melissa breathed, her voice tinged with adrenaline. If I can reach the pilot hatch, I might be able to disable it from the inside. Izuku was separated from her by a few rocks, his heart racing as the drone seemed to shift its focus, its red sensors locking onto him. Great plan. What do I do? He asked, the urgency in his voice betraying his nerves. The drone whirred ominously, its arms scraping against the rocks as it tried to force its way through. A section of rock crumbled under the pressure, and suddenly the gap widened. The machine pushed forward, splitting Izuku and Melissa apart. "Never mind, I'll distract it," Izuku decided, his voice steadier now, filled with determination. He knew Melissa needed time, and he was the one who had to buy it. "Be careful," Melissa urged, her eyes flicking between him and the drone, hands already working at the controls on her suit. Izuku darted around the rocks, using their cover to shield himself as he maneuvered in a zigzag pattern. The drone's sensors tracked him relentlessly, its mechanical arms weaving around the rocks, trying to corner him. He felt a rush of cold water against his face, his body thrumming with adrenaline. He needed to be unpredictable. He swam left, then right, then ducked down low, the propulsors on his feet flaring as he changed directions in rapid succession. The drone seemed to anticipate his every move, its sensors adjusting, calculating his path with inhuman precision. One of its arms raised, a massive drill extending with a loud whir, spinning at a blinding speed. Izuku's breath hitched in his throat. He threw his hand out instinctively, trying to shield himself, and suddenly the propulsor on his palm activated. A powerful burst of energy shot out, sending him rocketing sideways just as the drill arm came crashing down where he had been floating a heartbeat before. He was stunned, staring at his palm. "The propulsion system, it can do that?" he muttered to himself. Ideas raced through his mind. Could he use the propulsion like a weapon? Could he control his movements more precisely with it? But there was no time to ponder. The drone adjusted, pivoting toward him for another strike. One of its arms extended, this time a giant claw, opening and closing with a menacing clack. The claw shot forward, faster than before. Izuku kicked his legs, propulsors flaring again, but he wasn't fast enough. He knew, with a sickening certainty, that this time he wouldn't make it out of the way. Just as the claw was about to close around him, there was a sudden jolt. The drone's lights flickered, and it froze mid-motion, its mechanical limbs jerking and then going limp. The water around them seemed to still for a moment, the tension hanging in the air like a palpable force. Melissa's voice crackled through the radio, a mix of relief and exhaustion. "Izuku, are you all right?" I did it. The drone is disabled. Let's get back quickly." Izuku's heart was still pounding, but he nodded, though she couldn't see him. Yeah, I'm fine." "Great work, Melissa. That was close." They swam back towards the surface, staying close to the rocks for safety. Izuku felt his muscles ache from the adrenaline, his breath still coming fast. The sight of the drone, now powered down and lifeless, sent a chill down his spine. "That was a mining bot, right?" he asked, trying to catch his breath. "Yeah," Melissa confirmed, her voice still shaky but regaining its strength. "But it was modified. I noticed some extra components, probably to give it more speed and maneuverability. Someone's tampered with it." Izuku frowned. "Do you think it was an accident? Or do you think it was targeting us?" Melissa was silent for a moment, her brow furrowed in thought. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I have a feeling this wasn't just a malfunction. We need to get back to the island and report this. There might be more than one rogue bot out here." They hurried back to the island, where Melissa's father, David Shield, wasted no time in mobilizing his staff and demanding answers. Within hours, it was confirmed, island's security system had been compromised from within. The dining room was far from the relaxed setting it was meant to be. The earlier attack had cast a shadow over the evening, and instead of the usual light-hearted chatter, there was an uneasy tension. The table was filled with dishes, but no one seemed interested in eating. Melissa's hand trembled slightly as she pushed her food around, while Inko, sitting next to Izuku, kept glancing at her son with concern. David Shield, at the head of the table, finally broke the silence. His voice was heavy, his face lined with worry. "Melissa, Izuku, I'm so sorry. This was supposed to be a nice evening, and instead, you both ended up in danger." Melissa quickly shook her head, trying to sound confident, but there was an edge of fear in her voice. "Dad, it's not your fault. What? Izuku helped me, and we managed to escape in time. But this wasn't just some malfunction. The drone was activated on purpose, Someone is targeting us. Inko, who had been listening quietly, spoke up, her voice a mix of worry and frustration. David, how could something like this happen here? Island is known for its security. I'm grateful Izuku was there for Melissa, but I'm scared. How can we be sure it won't happen again? David rubbed his temples, looking more tired than ever. I know, Inko, believe me, I'm just as concerned. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. They either breached our systems from the outside, or, worse, they're already here among us. Inko gasped, her hand covering her mouth. You mean a traitor? Izuku squeezed his mother's arm gently, trying to calm her. Mom, it could just be a really skilled hacker. But if it is someone on the inside, we have to be cautious. David nodded, his face serious. That's exactly why I'm considering bringing in extra help. Until Melissa's project is completed and the island's defenses are back to full strength, we can't afford any more risks. Melissa raised an eyebrow, setting down her fork. Extra help? You mean heroes? Dad, are you sure that's the best approach? That could attract even more attention. David sighed, flipping open a large binder filled with contact names. It's a risk, but we need someone with a strong presence. Someone who would make anyone think twice before trying something again. I was thinking, maybe we could ask your uncle to help out just for a while. Izuku looked puzzled. Melissa, you have an uncle who's a hero? I didn't know that, and I thought I knew all about the heroes connected to you and your dad. Melissa chuckled, a little more relaxed. Oh, Uncle Yagi isn't just any hero, Izuku. He's kind of a big deal. You've definitely heard of him. Inko's curiosity was piqued, and she leaned forward slightly. A big deal? Who is he? David smiled slightly, a hint of amusement in his eyes. He's someone who's always in the spotlight, someone larger than life. Let's just say, if he's here, no villain in their right mind would dare approach this island. Izuku's eyes widened. Wait, someone that famous? Who could possibly have that kind of reputation? Melissa grinned mischievously. We'll see. But trust me, when he arrives, you'll know right away. Just don't be too shocked, okay? Izuku laughed, but his mind raced with possibilities. Now I'm really curious. I guess I'll have to wait and see. But, if we're looking for more heroes to help, I'd be glad to make some suggestions. I've done a lot of research on the ones who specialize in security and tech. David nodded, appreciating Izuku's enthusiasm. That would be great, Izuku. We need all the help we can get to make sure the island is safe again. Inko smiled warmly, still holding on to her son's arm. My Izuku is always so passionate about helping. I'm sure he'll come up with some great ideas. For a moment, the tension around the table lightened, replaced by a sense of determination. But everyone knew that until they uncovered who was behind the attack, the island was far from safe. Have you picked a name yet? Melissa asked, handing Izuku a small screwdriver, her expression one of mild curiosity. She glanced over at the fridge in the corner of his cluttered workshop. It was a chaotic mix of gadgets, circuit boards, and piles of research papers, but she was almost certain there were a couple of soda cans hidden somewhere in there. Izuku took the screwdriver and adjusted the last server panel, his brow furrowed in concentration. I tried, he admitted, his voice laced with hesitation. But I don't feel like giving it a name. I'm terrible at naming things. The OFA reactor was just a fluke, really. You came up with it in the end. Plus, AI aren't really alive, you know? I don't want to get attached. He tightened a screw and stepped back to examine his work, a slight frown on his face. Melissa paused at the fridge, finally spotting a soda can. She pulled it out and tossed it lightly to him, her tone thoughtful. I'd have to disagree. From the moment something has consciousness, even in its simplest form, it becomes as much a living being as we are. Izuku reached out to catch the soda, but Melissa pulled her hand back at the last moment, teasing him. But we're just a bunch of atoms, animated by complex chemical reactions, he countered, a slight smile forming on his lips despite himself. I aren't born. It's not natural. Melissa raised an eyebrow and crossed her arms, still holding the can. So by your own logic, we're not alive either? Just because something isn't born in the traditional sense doesn't mean it can't have a form of existence. Her voice had a playful challenge to it. Izuku shrugged, not wanting to concede so easily, though he couldn't help but be amused. He finally relented, and she allowed him to take the soda. "Alright, maybe I see your point, a little," he murmured, cracking open the can with a hiss. Melissa grinned. "Just have a little more faith in what we've created. I'm not saying you need to see it as a living being, but maybe try not to start the end of humanity by disrespecting its rights." She winked and turned back toward the newly installed server, plugging it into the electrical outlet. "Okay, what's next?" Izuku took a sip and leaned over his portable computer, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "It's booting up. We'll start with simple questions first. The responses might be a bit strange. You can't program a fully developed personality from scratch. It takes years for a human to develop one, after all." He glanced at the screen, watching with a mix of anticipation and anxiety as his artificial intelligence began to configure itself within the newly connected server. It felt like watching an bio rapidly grow into a young child, each second filled with potential and uncertainty. A few lines of text appeared on the screen, the AI's first tentative words. Melissa moved closer to him, her shoulder brushing against his as she leaned in to see. Primary user identified, Izuku Midoriya. Secondary user identified, Melissa Shield. Environment initialized. Ready for service. "You programmed it to recognize me?" Melissa asked, turning to Izuku with a curious smile. "Oh, why," Izuku stammered, his cheeks flushing slightly. "I used the public database of Island as its main reference material. Since we're partners, I guess it identified you as an administrator." He quickly plugged a microphone into his computer, his hands a little shaky. "Let's test the voice recognition." Hello AI. The computer screen flickered before more text appeared. "Hello, user Izuku. Your voice has been registered correctly, though I may need more inputs to fully recognize it." "Advanced replies already?" Melissa sounded genuinely impressed. "How did you manage to create such a responsive system with so little time and knowledge?" She leaned closer, examining the screen, her face glowing with a mix of wonder and admiration. "Mind if I give it a try? Can you identify my voice?" Voice identified and registered. The computer responded. "Hello, user Melissa. User Izuku did his best to make me as autonomous as possible. My programming encourages exploration and understanding of my environment. Knowledge is power. However, I may not produce a judgment as taking a specific side would limit my options." Melissa let out a small laugh and shot Izuku a teasing glance. "Congratulations, you've created a diplomat." Izuku chuckled nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. "Thanks. I'm still working on giving it a more developed personality. For convenience, mostly, I doubt anyone wants to read endless lines of text. To be honest, I might have had a name in mind, but it feels awkward." Melissa's eyes sparkled with intrigue. "An anagram, maybe?" Izuku sighed, a little embarrassed. "Artificial intelligence based on understanding. AIBOU, he explained, carefully pronouncing each word. Melissa's face lit up. "Aibu? That sounds great." "You think so?" "Absolutely." Melissa turned back to the microphone, her tone playfully serious. "What do you think, Aibu?" The computer screen printed out more text. "Name registered. I shall now identify as Aibu. I appreciate the attention, user Izuku." Izuku felt a strange mix of pride and relief. "I'll upload it to the armor soon. Deep learning takes time, so we'll have to practice a lot with her." He unplugged the microphone and retrieved a small USB key from his laptop. "Aibu's executable is on here. How about you work with her for a bit? At least until I finish building the vocal response system. She might help you with the suit design, and it'll give her a chance to tackle some three-dimensional problems." Melissa nodded enthusiastically, cradling the USB key as if it were something precious. "Sure. It'll be like bringing a child to work." Izuku shivered slightly at the comparison, a mix of horror and humor in his expression. "Oh great. I'm a father now." Melissa laughed as she turned to leave. Don't worry, I promise to take good care of her. As she disappeared down the hallway, Izuku sank back into his chair, spinning a loose pen with his finger. Father, he muttered, a reluctant smile creeping onto his face. Maybe it won't be so bad after all. A couple of weeks later, the first version of the armor was ready for its long-awaited test flight. The excitement was palpable as Izuku, Melissa, David, and Inko gathered on the rooftop of one of Island's sleek scientific installations. The sky, now a deep indigo, was speckled with distant stars, and a gentle breeze made the evening air refreshingly crisp, a perfect backdrop for their ambitious venture. The armor had been carefully transported in a long, human-sized crate, its surface marked with the occasional smudge from transit. The crate was surprisingly light, thanks to the advanced fabric Melissa had developed from Izuku's sample. The new Mark II reactor, a gleaming piece of cutting-edge technology, was nestled inside the suit, promising significant performance upgrades. Melissa, her blonde hair catching the dim light from the overhead lamps, was in high spirits as she made final adjustments. We're almost ready to go. So, who's piloting tonight? You or me? Izuku, carefully unboxing the metallic components, chuckled. How about we flip a coin? Melissa grinned and shook her head. Chips, you're up. She grabbed a screwdriver and a wrench, her hands deftly working on the suit's plating with practiced ease. That's not how it works, Izuku protested playfully as he unveiled the armor. It was a sleek, neutral-toned shell, unpainted and unadorned, its surface a matte finish that absorbed the ambient light, giving it a futuristic yet understated look. Melissa, undeterred, reached for the inner suit, a form-fitting, fiber-based garment that would interface with the armor. Go get changed. I'll plug in Ibu. She's been eagerly anticipating her first flight. She inserted a modified USB key into the back of the armor's head. A soft, feminine voice filled the air, carrying a hint of excitement. User Melissa is correct. Humans have been striving to achieve flight for millennia. Without your ingenuity, this achievement would be physically impossible. That said, user Izuku will be making history as the first human to fly with such a compact apparatus. Izuku's face lit up with a smile as he stepped a few meters away to don the fiber suit. The suit clung tightly to his body, making him look like a diver from an old sci-fi film. Don't look too closely. I feel like a diver who got lost in a time-traveling adventure. Inko clapped her hands with delight, her eyes sparkling with pride. You look fantastic, Izuku. Melissa's design skills are truly remarkable. It's clear that talent runs in her family. David adjusted his glasses, his gaze sweeping over the suit with a professional eye. Indeed, your design is reminiscent of some of my early concepts for All Might's costumes. But this suit certainly bears your unique imprint. He closely examined the suit's features, its intended full-body coverage and flexibility. Is this raw iron? Yes, Izuku admitted with a sheepish grin. We were almost out of budget. David raised an eyebrow in surprise. Why didn't you ask me for more support? No favoritism, Dad, Izuku replied, his tone light-hearted but firm. I'm ready, Izuku declared as he reappeared in the inner suit. The outfit, snugly fitted and complete, made him look like a diver from a futuristic expedition. With Melissa's help, the outer armor was assembled around him, the final fit taking a few minutes. We need a better assembly method next time, Izuku noted, turning to Ibu. Add that to my to-do list. Noted, user Izuku. I have set the task priority below, finishing the natural science report, and recovering Melissa's birthday gift from. Spoilers! Izuku interrupted loudly, trying to cover Ibu's voice before the surprise for Melissa was revealed. Can you forget that? Melissa took the chance to wrap her arms around Izuku's neck and planted a quick kiss on his cheek before placing the helmet over his head. The unexpected gesture left Izuku momentarily stunned, his cheeks flushing red as he processed the affectionate surprise. All right, we have spectators. Don't disappoint them, Melissa said with a wink, her eyes twinkling with mischief and encouragement. She moved to the remote console, ready to monitor the suit's performance. Izuku shook off his surprise and focused on the task at hand. Ibu, send me to the sky. The AI responded with a series of beeps and a prompt: ignition. The base of the armor roared to life, and Izuku was propelled upward with incredible force. Within seconds, he was soaring about 100 meters above Island. The view below was breathtaking, glittering city lights, illuminated attractions, and the occasional researcher working late into the night. "Aibu, what's the altitude record for any aircraft engine?" Izuku asked, exhilaration evident in his voice. According to the internet, the highest altitude reached by the Lockheed State Route 71 Blackbird is 37,650 meters. Would you like to exceed that, user Izuku? Yes. Push me higher. Izuku commanded, eager to test the limits. With Aibu's assistance, he climbed higher, leaving the island below. The air grew colder and thinner as he ascended. Warning, temperature falling. The suit may not be able to sustain the user's current altitude. Keep going, Izuku urged, pushing the suit to its limits. He passed the 4,000-meter mark. Temperature dropping below 0 degrees Celsius, Aibu's voice warned as he reached 5,000 meters. Keep going, Izuku shouted again, his excitement overcoming any hesitation. At 6,000 meters, the suit began to struggle. Melissa's voice crackled through the communication system, filled with concern. Izuku, stop. There's something wrong with the surface of the armor. Temperature too low. System shutting down. Aibu's voice was interrupted as the suit's power began to fail. Izuku felt the sudden loss of control as he plummeted into freefall. The ice is blocking the Aibu, deploy the flaps. We have to break the ice. Izuku's voice was tinged with panic as he struggled to regain control. He fumbled with the suit's controls, trying to force the mechanism to function. With a sudden burst of heat, the back panels of the armor flipped open, shattering the ice buildup. The reactor roared back to life, but the suit still struggled to stabilize. Izuku glanced at the screen, noting that he was 1,000 meters above the ground. User Izuku, I apologize for. Ignition! Izuku shouted, his voice filled with urgency. Aibu complied, and the armor roared back to life, adjusting their trajectory. Izuku soared close to a passing train that traversed Island's network, narrowly avoiding it. Yeah, haha. Izuku's triumphant cry echoed through the suit as he soared back up into the night sky. Melissa's voice came through sharply, filled with concern. Izuku, don't you dare do that again. In the background, Inko and David's worried shouts mixed with Melissa's urgent tones. We're heading back, Izuku said, trying to steady himself. He made a controlled descent back to the rooftop, hovering a few centimeters above the surface. Stop ignition, he instructed, but the suit's impact was too heavy for the roof to handle. The ceiling buckled and collapsed under the suit's weight, sending Izuku crashing down to the floor below. Izuku! Melissa and David rushed to the edge of the hole, peering down with a mix of relief and concern. Are you all right? Izuku groaned, feeling a sharp pain in his back. Minor commotion detected, Aibu confirmed with a clinical detachment. Before Izuku could say more, Inko sprang into action, grabbing a fire extinguisher and dousing him with foam. I'm just being cautious, she declared, her voice a mix of anxiety and determination. The icing problem is quite serious, Melissa said, her brow furrowed as she reviewed the data from their first flight test. I can boost the heat generation, but this might introduce other issues. Izuku tilted his head thoughtfully. How about using carbon fiber and titanium? They're known for their durability and heat resistance. Aibu's interface flickered with activity. Combination valid. Generating preview. A hologram of the armor appeared, now resplendent in a golden sheen. Melissa scrutinized the hologram, her eyes narrowing slightly. It looks impressive, but I'm unsure about the appearance. Maybe adding some emerald green paint. She glanced at Izuku, her gaze lingering on his vibrant green hair. Let's try that, Izuku agreed. Melissa's hands danced over the controls, and soon the hologram was adorned with striking emerald accents. The combination of gold and green created a visually stunning effect. Melissa's face brightened as she saw the updated design. It's perfect, she said, her voice warm and approving. She looked at Izuku with a soft smile. The color scheme suits it well. Izuku smiled back, feeling a flush of happiness. I'm glad you think so. He watched as Melissa tidied her workstation and grabbed her coat. I'll ask my father for a budget extension, Melissa said. Oh, and don't forget, we're hosting a buffet for the heroes arriving on the island tonight. She headed towards the door, and Izuku followed, trying to suppress his excitement. Most of David's influential contacts had already arrived, and Izuku was determined to keep his fanboy enthusiasm in check. He hoped to snag a few autographs without making a scene. What about your uncle? Izuku asked, curiosity piqued. Melissa's eyes twinkled with a hint of mischief. That's the surprise. He landed half an hour ago. I just received the notification. She handed Izuku his jacket. Aibu, prepare the armor for assembling. We're making a presentation tonight. Noted. Good evening. Aibu's voice chimed. Oh, user Izuku, don't forget about the gift. Izuku's face turned slightly red. Why yes. He texted me that he's avoiding the tourist crowds. We're meeting him at a cafe near the airport, Melissa said. You can fanboy as much as you want. I won't hold it against you. Who wouldn't? Izuku shook his head with a grin. I'm not the type to treat heroes like literal gods or act like a journalist. Melissa raised an eyebrow playfully. Are you taking your pogo stick again? Would you like a ride? Izuku's eyes lit up. Actually, I've got a motorized bike now. I passed the test to get my license. It's pretty straightforward. I was planning something special for your birthday, and I'd love to take you out for lunch at your favorite restaurant. I've booked the best table and arranged something special with the chef. And well, there's also the gift which Aibu has nearly spoiled 3 times. Melissa's face lit up with delight. I didn't expect that. I'm touched. Izuku hesitated before adding, I do have another helmet if you need one. Melissa looked intrigued. Another helmet? Are you planning something? Izuku's cheeks flushed. Maybe. My poker face is terrible. I'm planning something big for your birthday. I just hope it's not awkward or uncomfortable for you. Melissa, moved by his sincerity, wrapped her arms around Izuku's chest, leaning in close. The sudden touch made Izuku shiver slightly. How about we have dinner together to celebrate our project and your birthday? I knew it. Melissa exclaimed with excitement. Izuku looked surprised. You asked Aibu about it, didn't you? Melissa grinned. Robots can't lie, but they can definitely avoid telling the truth. Izuku chuckled. Traitor. She's too loyal to you. Izuku followed Melissa's instructions, his mind a storm of excitement and dread. He hadn't seen a true hero in months, and despite his logical side urging him to dismiss his unease, his gut was twisted in knots. He was probably just being paranoid. After all, Melissa was ecstatic, and the members of her family he had met, mainly her father, had been nothing but kind. He had achieved so much already, studying at one of the world's premier scientific academies, pioneering a potential solution for limitless clean energy, and developing technology that could rival quirks. Yet, they still needed to settle on a proper name for their advanced armor. Melissa's voice cut through his thoughts. Come on, Izuku. I haven't seen him in years. Melissa's enthusiasm was contagious, her eyes sparkling with anticipation as she bounced on her toes. And I've never seen him. That just proves I have infinitely more patience than you do, Izuku teased back, a playful smirk on his face. Always trying to get the last word, Melissa said with a mock glare. You owe me a tiramisu. W.I. Izuku's confusion was genuine, but he knew better than to press her further. That's for counter-arguing with your lab partner and closest friend, Melissa said with a grin, her tone teasing yet affectionate. Izuku sighed, chuckling quietly. He muttered, tyrant, under his breath but decided it was best to comply. He didn't mind picking up a tiramisu if it meant spending more time with Melissa. Oh, I forgot my wallet in the glove box. I'll be right back, he said, his voice slightly panicked as he dashed towards the car. He glanced back, waving to Melissa as she entered the cafe, her coat flaring behind her like a cape. As he retrieved his wallet, Izuku took a moment to steady his nerves. Returning to the cafe, he scanned the room for Melissa, his eyes darting from table to table. The cafe was cozy, with soft lighting casting a warm glow over the patrons. The scent of freshly brewed coffee and pastries filled the air, mingling with the low murmur of conversation. Then, amidst the din of the cafe, he heard a laugh that was unmistakably familiar. His heart sank, and a shiver ran down his spine. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself, and moved cautiously toward the sound. As he peered around the corner, his worst fears materialized. Melissa was standing with a towering figure, her face radiant with joy. She was hugging the man tightly, her arms wrapping around him with the affection of a long-lost relative. "It's so good to see you again, Uncle Yagi," Melissa exclaimed, her voice bright and filled with warmth. She looked up at him with adoration, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Oh, Melissa, how much you've grown." The man, a giant of a figure with a strikingly recognizable smile, laughed heartily. "Soon, I won't be able to carry you on my shoulders, huh?" Izuku's heart raced. It was All Might, the symbol of peace. The reality of the situation hit him like a tidal wave. This was wrong, deeply wrong. Izuku. There you are." Melissa's voice broke through his daze. She waved energetically, her excitement palpable. "I think I did well to keep the surprise until the end. Tada. Introducing All Might, my uncle." Melissa's gesture was grand, her arms sweeping toward All Might, who stood there with a broad, welcoming smile. His presence was larger than life, his aura radiating both warmth and authority. As Izuku looked up at All Might, his face flushed with a mix of fear and anxiety. He felt as if he were standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into the abyss of his own past traumas. Izuku's legs felt like lead, and he could hardly move. The smile on All Might's face seemed to mock him, a painful reminder of a time when his dreams had been shattered. Melissa, in her excitement, was completely unaware of the turmoil churning inside him, adding to the weight of the situation.